Hello, and thank you for coming to check out the latest episode of the Brooks Breakthrough Podcast. I'm so happy and excited that you're about to listen to an amazing mentor of mine, Ed Iannarella. He made a huge impact on my life over the last decade. And I wanted to share that before we jump into the episode, his interview is going to be a little bit different than the typical layout of these interviews. Usually we do it anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, and guests are able to share how they've built their business and provide advice to other entrepreneurs, investors, business owners. And we're going to do that here, but he's been given a little bit more time. So Ed has worked in a number of industries. He has been a mentor to hotel owners, operators, developers, all over the country, and not just here in the States, but even abroad. He has served as a mentor to so many that he's come in contact with. He is so open to giving of his time, his knowledge, his encouragement. But on top of that, he is currently battling his 11th stage 4 cancer over the last decade. He's had a number of them that have hit, but this one in particular is, I think, number 11. And so I really wanted to offer him a platform where he could share just a bit more than just how he's built his business. He's going to go more in depth, share more experiences, share more insight, and it is filled with so much encouragement, wisdom, words of advice to other leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs. So it's going to be a wealth of knowledge. So as we jump into this, I hope that you were encouraged. I hope that you're motivated, and I hope that you enjoy it, whether you take it in its entirety, the whole 3 hours, or in batches. I hope that it would serve as an amazing encouragement and tool to whatever it is that you are building in your world. So without further ado, enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Brooks Breakthrough Podcast. I am your host, Ashley Brooks, and today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing you to Ed Iannarella, a public speaker, author, trainer, and consultant. For the last decade, I've personally known him as a mentor and very dear friend of mine. Ed has lived quite a life, and today he's going to share some of his journey with us and the lessons learned along the way. So, Mr. Ed, thank you so much for joining me and taking the time to be on the podcast. It's truly a pleasure.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. I'm humbled by it, and want to share some stories, share some lessons, share some heartache, share some good stuff. But that's what life is all about. As Ashley taught me about a decade ago, I had never forgotten that lesson. But great to be here.
Yeah, no, there's certainly a lot of lessons that you've taught me, and I'm looking forward to us getting into some of those. And I really want to thank you for being here, because I know that when I first started this podcast, you were one of the first guests I wanted on. So you were one of the first phone calls I made. And so we've had to do some rescheduling. I know you've had some stuff with your health going on, but I know that you made it a point to be here in a priority. So I so appreciate it. But I know that, again, you've had some stuff with your health go on. Are you open to sharing any of that with us today?
I am. I'm in. I'm dealing with cancer, which many of you have had to deal with over the years, friends, family. I am currently a stage 4 cancer with melanoma, and starting some radiation tomorrow on my brain. And so that's the heartache part. And by the way, any of you that have had this in your life, you'll know what I'm about to tell you. So it's not the easiest thing, but I'm not going to let it stop me from moving ahead, always moving ahead. And I feel great today. I don't know about 2 weeks from now, but hey, we'll take it while we got it. I wanted to tell you a very brief throwback to when I was 13 or 14. I went to a basketball camp in Pennsylvania, and my camp counselor was from New York City, maybe about 7 or 8 years older than I was, or 7 perhaps. And I went on to grow up and become a person looking for a college to attend. He grew up and became the basketball coach at Rutgers University. And after that, I didn't go there, by the way, but it was nice of him to remember me. But he went on to coach a national championship team at North Carolina State. He won the NCAA championship, and then he contracted cancer as well. So some of you will know this man by name. Others may not, but you may want to look him up. He's really inspirational. His last week or so of his life, he was on ESPN, and they brought him up because he started a foundation since he's passed many years ago. That foundation has raised hundreds of millions of dollars for cancer. But his last final words in his speech, which some of you have seen, he said, cancer can take this from my life and that from my life, but he said, don't give up, don't ever give up. And that's the mantra that I'm taking. I'm following my former mentor's advice. And so let's move ahead and jump into this stuff. I'm excited to tell you. And back to you, Ashley.
I love that, and it so speaks to who you are. And so that was a big part of you that you just shared with us. So I want to get into, for those who may not know, Ed, what can you share with people who share some of your background, where you're from, and give us an idea of who you are and what you built.
Well, let me start out with where I am currently, and then I can kind of retroactively move back. I started with a relatively small company called Marriott Hotels in a long time ago. And it was a small company at the time. There were 70 hotels. Today, there are close to 7,000 or 8,000 hotels. So it's the largest in the world. But back then, something special actually was happening. And I noticed that they were growing rapidly. I was with them for 5 years. And every year was a 20% growth on their initial return on investment for many of their stakeholders was outstanding. They wanted to know what was going on, but they didn't care because they kept getting the checks. So I learned a lot from Marriott, a lot that I can't even recall, but it really imbued in me what I try to pass on to others. They were very oriented and what I would call SOP oriented. They had rules and regulations and recipe cards in the restaurants and everything you can imagine for people that were new to them. So we got to know them quickly and what they wanted. No questions about their leadership. And speaking of leadership, many of your listeners will be leaders and owners and operators. I read something that was interesting. It said that people would rather follow someone who's not right most of the time, but they are decisive, than to follow someone who's right most of the time, but are indecisive. So for whatever that's worth to you, it helps in a leadership position to be decisive. How you get there is up to you, but I felt that was important just to mention. So let's go back to this small company that grew so rapidly. They had, in addition to the standard operating procedures, they cared about the guest and they cared about the people that supported everybody else. In fact, this is an attempt at a pyramid. They flipped it over the other way to say that all of the people at Marriott hotels at the corporate offices were really insignificant and should not be at the top of the pyramid like most companies would like you to believe. In fact, they flipped it over and they said, who makes this thing happen? It's actually customers. And so they put them at the top of their pyramid and then went all the way down to overhead as they saw themselves to be. And that philosophy was pervasive throughout all of their growth spurts. So we learned that, yes, the customer comes first. Don't think short term, think long term, and they'll stay with you for a long time. And obviously that has worked dramatically for them. One other thought, at Marriott, when someone left, let's say Ashley got promoted to another hotel in another state, which would not be unusual. I could see that happening quickly with you, Ash. But when people left to go to another hotel, people did skits and they were pretty crummy, as I recall. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to drag out my guitar from a previous lifetime when I was 14, and I'm going to write some songs. So I would say, okay, Ashley's moving on to XYZ hotel. Let me interview all of her friends. And someone tell me what you know about Ashley. I'm going to write it down. And they did. And I had all this amorphous information that I then translated into a song about Ashley. And I only knew about 3 or 4 songs when I had my rock group at age 14. But I grabbed a couple of crazy, wild salespeople, and they became my background group. I named the group Eddie I and the Introverts. They were not introverts. I just said that facetiously. And we started doing parties when people left to go to another hotel. And it caught on really, really well. So much so that one day later, we did it in Miami for a worldwide convention of all Marriott hotels, and had a great time with it. I think my contribution to Marriott may have been better with the rock and roll group than it was with my skill sets there. But anyway, I digress. So I got a call one day, Ash, and it was from someone who used to work with me at Marriott. And he said, I want you to talk to me about your ability to move out of where you are now into something new. And I said, go on, go on. And he told me about a company called Residence Inns. Never heard of it at the time. But at that time, he made it sound really like it was the future. So I decided I would go for an interview. They flew me out on a Learjet, and that got my attention very, very quickly. I had never been in that situation before. And so I actually took a job with Residence Inn, which was a very small company as well at the time. And today there are 600 of them all over the place. So learned a lot about entrepreneurs from the other side. I was the corporate side, but we learned about people that have their own businesses and how some of them were small and some of them were large. So with the very large people, they kind of already had the infrastructure built. We treated them differently in terms of what they needed. And the smaller individuals were also very new and wanted to know how to get started. So we treated them slightly differently. And I would say I learned more from the individuals who were starting up than I did from the big guys. Big people had already been there and done that, whereas the small people wanted to know how to get to the next level. So Residence Inn, also interesting highlight, sent me back to New York City one day to put on a trade show. And so there I went with my Dallas-based generated material and a wonderful trade show booth. And so I set up the booth, and it looked like a Residence Inn, which for many of you who don't know that, it is a home-like atmosphere, it has a kitchen and a separate living area, etc. So I set up this room that looked like a Residence Inn at the trade show, and they hit the doors flooded open, and in came all these people, and they looked at all the other hotels that were there, and they understood that. But when they came to Residence Inn, they said, what in the world, what is this? We don't understand it. They thought I was selling refrigerators, which I had in the back of the kitchen. They thought I was selling appliances, which I also had in the kitchen. And then they also said, well, maybe you're selling TVs. I had a setup in the living room. So they had no earthly clue about what I was selling. So that sale dictated a whole host of, let's start from the beginning. We'll tell you the story. And now you'll understand why we're new, why we're different, and all of those interesting things that we'll talk about during this segment today. So that was my Residence Inn days. I have lots of great friends from my hotel careers, like you, Ashley, and like my Marriott and Residence Inn days. So that's kind of why I finally left Residence Inn for a career with an entrepreneur that offered me ownership in hotels. So I said, that sounds interesting. How does it work? We worked it out. I moved back from Kansas, where I had been at the time with Residence Inn.
I'm going to interrupt you just really
Yes,
quick,
ma'am. Yes.
Mr. Ed, just to give some people some insight. So Residence Inn was one of the first extended stay hotels. So this was like the beginning of extended stay. So now there's how many brands are there?
There,
I don't know how many, every major family, when you look at, let's say, IHG, Marriott, Hilton, all of them have multiple extended stay properties. So like with Marriott, it's Residence Inn and Town Place. It's two versions. So what I want to get to, just so people understand, especially people not coming from hotels, the Residence Inn concept was a really big deal because it was the first one that led to all of these other brands that came out.
great point. And I really should elaborate a little bit. The fellow that I went to work for is legendary in the Hall of Fame of hotels. His name was Jack DeBoer. And Jack was the second largest owner of apartment complexes in the United States. And then came 1973, 74, and there was an oil embargo, and the country fell apart, and his apartment complexes were not being used anymore. So two of his entrepreneurial general managers in Wichita, Kansas, got together and they said, Jack, people are asking us about renting these month only units for a week at a time or a guest at a time. Would you consider that? And he said, no, until the pain was so great, Ash. The pain was financially great because of the lack of people moving to different markets and needing temporary housing. So he said, okay, give it a try. So they did. And all of a sudden, they were filling those two on either end of the town of Wichita, filling those two hotels. And Jack thought, maybe we have something here. So let's put out a giant US flag that makes people see us instantly. And let's paint all of the orange, all of the doors orange on the outside of the units. And he started to rent them by a day at a time, and a week at a time, and a month at a time. And as it turned out, occasionally a year at a time or more. But he created a new niche of the hotel industry. And because of that, Ash, and that was a great question, he built, I think he built 5 and then sold them to a gentleman in Dallas. But then one day he longed for his baby. I think he may have invented the ad campaign. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. Maybe he did. I made that up. But he did buy it back from the fellow in Dallas. And he then took it and he started hiring people like me. He went to Marriott and went to really great companies and said, come on, we need you out here, guys. And they paid us a lot more. And we said, okay, great opportunity. So yes, Residence Inn has been the most successful segment or type of business ever since that day. And even in downtimes like COVID, Residence Inns were doing great things and other hotel chains were not, because they're relying upon extended stay guests staying for over a week or more. So that's sort of the quick historical background of how we got this. And yes, Marriott, ironically, Marriott called Jack DeBoer one day when there were about 100 hotels and said, we were kind of investigating extended stay, but we see you have 100 hotels. May we buy them? And Jack was the best business person I've ever met and best salesperson I've ever met. He said, okay, let's talk. And he did. And he sold them ironically, to the company that I had left to go to. And many other people left as well. And as a result, yes, he sold them to Marriott. So today, people know them as Residence Inn by Marriott. But I was working for them back in the fundamental, foundational days of the corporation. So yes, every imaginable hotel chain from IHG to Hilton to Residence Inns and Best Westerns and on and on and on, they all now have woken up to this, what they call news segment. I find it interesting because it was many decades before when I knew what they're just finding out now, not because I'm bright, just because I'm old and I happen to be there at the beginning. But yeah, they all have extended stay and they're all outperforming by about 20% annually on their occupancies. And their GOPs, for those of you that like metrics, their GOPs are traditionally 10 to 20% higher than traditional hotels.
Got it. That was great. That's such great insight. So we're going to get really geeky today about a lot of hotel stuff. We can't help it. It's just going to happen. So giving people an advance on that now. But let's go back. So I want to make sure that people understand what you've built, because there's a lot you've done in your life. And then we'll go into, what led you to do all of this. But so as far as what you've built, so we can give people an idea. So hotels is a really big aspect of your life, because you were able to start out with brands and now you're at a place where you've for the last, I don't know how long, you have been a mentor to a number of hotel owners, developers, investors. I know that when I met you, you became a mentor of mine because you were a mentor to the owners that owned the portfolio I worked for. But in addition to that, share a little bit more about your what it is that you've excelled at and kind of your niches that you've gotten into.
Well, it's going to take me back in time a bit, and I will do that. But first, a word from our sponsors. I do work in other industries. So for those of you that are not in hotels, I have worked in the airline business, the telecommunications business, the apparel business, and on and on and on. So yes, there are lessons for everybody. I think hopefully that's the case. So yes, I started out as a novice, not knowing anything about anything, and then went to work for a corporation where I got my chops, so to speak, about corporate America. And then I evolved, as I mentioned earlier, to the Residence Inn days that led me to a management company. Now, at that management company, I had ownership. A new word, ownership. That was important to me because it meant future security. So yes, I did go back from, I left my heart, not in San Francisco, but in Residence Inn, which was in Wichita, believe it or not. And here I am back in my home state of Pennsylvania, where I'm originally from, and working hard. And we built 8 hotels while I was there. I was there for quite a while, probably 8 years. And a lot of 8s going on here. So in addition to those hotels, we also built something called Cinnabons. Raise your hand, be honest, don't people out in the audience. Raise your hand if you've ever had a Cinnabon. Oh, there's a guy out in, excuse me, in California, and he's pretending he never had one. Sorry, we know you've been there. But everybody has heard of a Cinnabon. So again, I got with them as an early entrepreneur, and along with the gentleman who owned the management company that I worked for. So we were partners, and I reported to him at the same time. But that's when I started the entrepreneurial flair of, wow, this is different from managing hotels. So I now have to think totally like an owner. And that involved a lot of investment. And I borrowed money like everybody else. And that was not easy. It was certainly necessary, but that was a tremendous lesson for me in the realities of producing revenue. Now, I know this will sound a little bit strange to some, maybe not to all, but the main purpose of being involved with any business is to generate revenue. Now, that sounds crass because clearly it's not the only reason. I mean, I don't work for just the revenue. I haven't for a long time. Other people love what they do. They want to help other people. That's really what is important to me. But the bottom line, or should I say the top line that led to the bottom line, is revenue. And revenue does many good things. It allows us to grow our businesses if we want to. I chose not to, but if we want to, we can grow them, and we'll have room for opportunity for people to move up in the ranks as well. So if you are an entrepreneur and starting out, feel free to call me if you'd like. My information's on my LinkedIn site, and I'd be happy to share all sorts of wonderful things over the years. We don't have all that time today, but I'm willing to take the time and tell you what I learned, what I didn't learn, what I lost, and what I have. So please take that into consideration. So, okay, now back to your original question, which is where did this start out? Is that where you were headed? Sort of?
Yes. So now that we know kind of what you've done, what led you there? Because I know
Okay.
you didn't start out entrepreneurial wanting to own businesses and invest and everything
No?
like that, correct? Okay. So what got you there? Of where did you start and what got you to that place?
Okay. I was born a poor child. Oh, I won't say that. Sounds like everybody else. I was born in the suburb of Philadelphia. Kind of a rough crowd in Philly. I love everybody there, but I know the reputation's not so great on the sports end of things. But I kind of loved basketball. Why did I love basketball? Well, my dad worked for the Philadelphia 76ers. And before them, little known fact, the Philadelphia Warriors, who later uprooted and went to Golden State, where they are currently the correct Golden State Warriors. Thank you. Someone from Utah just chatted with me and I got that answer. So I had no choice. I grew up in the NBA household. I happened to love basketball. I worked really, really hard at it every day, day and night, winter, summer, everything. When my friends were at the swimming pool, I was out there in the sun and out there and practicing hard. And by the way, my melanoma that I referenced earlier had nothing to do with the sun. It's a genetic defect. Okay, got that on the table. So but I was out in the sun. So in high school, I set a goal for myself. I said, I want to help my parents. I want to get a scholarship. And I set that maybe 10th grade. I finally made the varsity team. And my goal was, it's ironic that it was a goal because basketballs have goals. I get it. Ed. Okay. Not that funny, by the way. I can laugh inwardly. You don't have to laugh. It's not obligated. Ashley is optional. She's the host. She can do whatever she wants. So I did. I actually got a whole bunch of ego-worthy letters of intent from big-time colleges like North Carolina, Dean Smith, and Maryland, and Duke University. Even the Coast Guard Academy had a basketball team. Who knew? So I got a whole bunch of those things, and I read them, and I said to myself, look, Ed, the main thing you want is an education. You're 5'10". It's not likely you're going to make it into the NBA, Ed, no matter what you might do. So I did play basketball, and I had a wonderful career at a very small school in Pennsylvania that no one ever heard of, and had a terrific basketball career in addition to a great education. So it all started back in high school. I started to be goal oriented, objective oriented, and boy, did that help. That helped me a great deal. I found out later in life, and I don't want to forget this, that not only having a goal is important, but when you have a goal, I have learned this over and over again, you must write it down and look at it frequently. You have to do that. Why is that? Because there's a part of your brain, just like a part of my brain, that is called the RAS, the reticular activating system. And what happens is when your visual sense focuses on something, whether you read it, see it on TV, whatever, it cranks up the learning mechanism and it forces us to focus on what we want to achieve. Excuse me. So whether you take your goals and make them specific, make them measurable as well, because if you don't, you'll never know when you get there. So that's important, to make your goals specific and measurable, and then write them down. Maybe put them up on your refrigerator with a magnet. Who knew? Maybe you put them on your screensaver. I don't know how you do it, but look at it frequently. That will greatly increase the ability for you to achieve your goals. And you can be flexible. At times, you may have to redo certain parts of your goals depending on what happens as well. Okay, so from there, I went to a great small college, 950 in the entire college, which is unusual. And I learned some interesting things there from my basketball experience as well. I also learned to be a leader there. I was very fortunate to be the president of two of my years at Lebanon Valley College, and also captain of my team, and also 2 years of president of a fraternity. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you that I sort of started my learning curve on leadership during those time frames, and they were very helpful later on in life. So while I was at Lebanon Valley, Ashley, one of the summers I ended up, well, every summer I worked at basketball camps, but one summer in particular, there was a need to put together a team that would travel to Europe and to represent the United States in something that was called the Latna Cup, LATNA. It was sponsored, the trip was sponsored by the United States State Department. And so I was on this particular team. We went to Europe, and I had a wonderful experience there. And we went first to Germany and played against their top teams. And then we went over to a company called Czechoslovakia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so old that they went and changed the name of the country, right? It was called Czechoslovakia. Now it's right, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia is separate. But hey, back in the day, who cares? Nobody cares about the past. Let's bring it up to the future. Okay. So I'm playing against the Olympic team of the Czech Republic, as you know it today. And that was extremely humbling. And we wore US jackets that said US on it before you could buy them anywhere and everywhere nowadays. Back then you couldn't get them. Only the State Department had them, and who knows how they got them. But that was a humbling experience, seeing life in a communist country. Actually, this was a satellite country of the Soviet Union. And so we had to have special visas to get into the country. And in fact, the US State Department even threw us a hot dog party one night while we were there. We were there for 8 days in the Czech Republic, and they had hot dogs just so we'd feel at home. But representing your country is very different from representing your family or yourself. So it was quite a humbling experience. But we noticed how the people's spirits were all down and out because their freedoms were gone. So that was not only punishing to me, but when I went back to the United States and kissed the ground that we landed on, I'm talking about literally, it made me think of how fortunate we are. Now, I know this country we're in now has problems and always will, but having been to other countries, and I've been to over 30 countries over my travels over the years, but when that was my first trip abroad, made me realize the freedoms that we have that they didn't have. Walking down the streets of Prague, Czechoslovakia, there were machine gun troops all over the place, so you didn't want to make too much of a noise. The city itself was quiet, and it was a large city, as big as my hometown city of Philadelphia at that time, which was 4th largest in the United States. Noisy, from everybody making, saying what they want to say. Not the case in the Czech Republic. So we left our sneakers behind for the team's some of the local teams that we played against in addition to the Czech team. And we just left it behind as a gesture of, here's American people, and here's a little souvenir for you. So then I graduated Lebanon Valley, and my president of the college came to me one day and said, we'd like to nominate you for a Rotary Foundation fellowship. It was entitled the International Rotary Foundation Fellowship for Human Understanding. Big, long name. It basically meant that, and if you happen to win this, you can study anywhere in the world outside of the United States, but we want you to promote whatever you want to promote, but clearly try to understand the differences. So I started learning diversity because I did win that contest. And I had a girlfriend, Ash, who lived in California at the time. So I originally had thought about England and Australia and other parts unknown. But because she was in California, I thought, let me at least be close enough to, be in driving distance. So I picked out a map of North America. Do you remember maps? Anybody out there remember maps? A couple. Okay, all right, fine. Most of you know GPS. I get it. Okay. So for those of you that remember maps, I pulled out this large map of North America, and I said, okay, my girlfriend lives here in Morgan Hill outside of San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And it's either northern Mexico, outside the United States I happen to study, or southern Canada. So I thought, okay, I speak Spanish, but it'd be a little easier in Canada. So I went and said, oh, here's a city, Vancouver, Canada. And found out they had a big school there called the University of British Columbia. I enrolled, I was accepted. And I spent time there learning even more about diversity. One would think that living in Canada, there wouldn't be much difference, but there was more than I had ever bargained for. They were a lot nicer than the people that I grew up with back home. No knock to my boys at home. I love them all. But they were a little softer than I had been accustomed to. They weren't quite as hyper as even I was at the time. And they also had a very strong awareness of international geopolitics. They knew more about our country than I did. They knew more about our politics than I did. Granted, I was in college, and at that time, you don't really focus on the bigger picture, but they were wonderful, and they also were keenly aware of their neighbors to the south, which is why in the NBA today, they oftentimes refer to their team from the north, which is in Toronto in the NBA. But they're keenly aware that they are our partners, and we're kind of the 500-pound gorilla, but we work together, and it's a beautiful country, not only physically, but the spirit of the people were actually terrific. So while I was there studying, I also joined the local basketball team. Oh, what a surprise, Ed. I didn't want to quite give up the game yet. I had to latch on, which is why I understand why when Tom Brady finally does declare his leaving the sport of football, I understand why these guys get emotional. So I played ball. We won our division. We won our British Columbia, whatever that provincial title was. And then all of a sudden, I found myself back in Toronto, Canada. We were representing British Columbia, and there were 3 other regions of Canada. And the 4 of us were all coming together for the quote unquote national championship of Canada. They didn't have an NBA team. So this was as high as it got. And yes, we won that game. I didn't play as much as I had during the season because they got an Olympic player off of the Olympic team. And they had the nerve to put him ahead of me. I don't understand that. A Canadian Olympian ahead of a guy from the United States. Anyway, one of the things I'll remember about my Canadian basketball experience, aside from the fact that we won the championship and I was the only American on the team, was that before each game started, and I'm to this day, I'm emotional and humbled by it. They played the Star Spangled Banner for me. Can you
Mm.
imagine? Can you imagine? I'm 21 years old, and I feel like I should be standing on a podium somewhere. But I was the only person on that floor in every game that was from the U.S. So I get it when I see it on TV. I get right here. All right, enough of
Mm.
that. Let's keep going forward, always onward, always upward. That's the way it has to be. So I did want to share that. Um, one more pet peeve, if I may. If I may, I'm tying it into the last thing I
This
said.
is yours, Ed. This is all yours.
The national anthem. Okay, when I do training, and I do a lot of training, and I do a lot of consulting, and I train with sales mostly, but also leadership and guest loyalties, a million subjects. If you're interested, fine. Let Ash know, whatever. But I always start off my classes with, okay, let's talk about a pet peeve that many of you may have. Only one per person, because many times there's 30 people in a classroom, and I don't want it to take forever. So we go around the class, and everybody tells me, I don't like people when people chew food and they're talking to me. I hate that. Or I wish they would hold the door open for me. When I when I'm when I'm dating somebody, I wish someone would just open the door just to show a little respect. I don't know. So we went through all that, and then they always ask me at the end, and I may need to take my Philadelphia Eagles cup. Sorry, guys. Dallas had a great game last night, but I'm rooting for my Eagles, guys.
You're good.
So Ed, what is your pet peeve? And I say to them, well, I'm glad you asked. And then I talked to them about what I'm going to talk to you about today. No charge extra for this, Ash. This is just bonus coverage because I love your audience. So I love the national anthem because I know what it stands for, at least in my lifetime. Different lifetime from others, granted. A lot older, got it. But a lot of people died for things like the national anthem and for the United States in general. So to me, it's a bit sacred. So now when I hear the national anthem sung, I get crazy. I get crazy because it should be a tradition. When I grew up, they sang it at the national anthem. They sang the national anthem at baseball stadiums and every place else. But I remember thinking back when my dad at the baseball stadium, and everybody stood up. We still do. People with hats took them off. Some people put their hand over their heart. Oh, sorry, we don't do that much. But they played the Star Spangled Banner, and guess what happened? A lot of people sang along. But guess what can't happen today? You can't do it because everybody, not everybody, military bands are the exception. They play it the way it was written. Francis Scott Key, I'm on your side. Trust me. Today, that tradition has gone from a tradition to an audition. And I have a problem with that. I don't care if it's 50 Cent and you're trying to increase your sales of records or anybody else, not knocking 50 Cent. Maybe he's good. Whoever it might be, I don't want to hear your local rendition of what you've done, especially to that last note in the land of the free. I don't want to hear that. I don't care because when you sing your version, even Whitney Houston, who started it off with a great rendition, hit me right here. But then I thought back on it years later. You can't follow these folks on television because you can't sing along. You have no earthly idea where they're going next or what speed or if they stop.
Mm.
It drives me crazy because you took the American citizen out of the equation. That's really about reminding them of what the Star Spangled Banner is all about. So I end on that note. Please think about it.
Yeah.
And let's get back to Ashley.
No, I love that. We go back into your story, I've heard from a number of people. You mentioned earlier about when you came back to the States and you literally kissed the ground. There's so many stories about that from people who have traveled abroad. I have so I'll tell you two stories. One, there's a girl I had on here last year. Her name's Tiara Tony. She's a friend of mine. We went to college together. We were roommates after college for a little bit. She is currently a teacher. She was a teacher in Egypt. Now she's in Milan. And she's very adventurous. So like on holidays, on weekends, her and her teacher friend, when she was living in Egypt, would just hop on a plane and go somewhere. They were always going and traveling, right? And so she was like, there's a lot of talk over here about, division in the States and all that, but she's like, people don't realize what that blue passport does for you. Just by having that blue passport, the power that you have against other people is unlike anything else. And she's like, and I experienced it firsthand with someone just trying to go to another country and the visa process and all of that. And she's like, we don't deal with that. Like we can easily travel so much more than other people. We can easily jump from country to country in ways that other people can't. There's that one. And then I have a sister who, after she graduated from college, she went and spent almost a year abroad. So she did this program called the World Race, where you do 11 countries in 11 months. And she said there was nothing like just coming back home. She was so grateful for the experience, but realizing how good we really do have it here. And it was interesting that you even bring up the Star Spangled Banner, and the so sorry, I'm blanking on it right now. At the start of every game when they play that in the national anthem, everything, like there was something that came on. I don't remember what it was when she was home. I think it was she had gotten home right before Thanksgiving. We were watching the Thanksgiving football game, and we all like stood up in honor. We've never done that in our house. And she was almost like she was moved to tears because of how grateful she is for this after being away for almost a year, and like realizing that is such a big deal and how like we take it so for granted. So it's an interesting thing when you get that experience of being somewhere else to come back, because it's a lot harder when you've never been somewhere else to have
Ashley,
gratitude for it.
that's music to my ears. I can understand how Brittany felt, who just came back from the
Yeah.
USSR. And in every session, I try to sneak in a lesson or two about that. Again, I have been abroad, like I said to you earlier, many, many times. And I love what I see there. And I appreciate the people, their history, I love history. And yet I'm always grateful for knowing that we have so many things they don't have. For example, even in my early days of going to Paris and London, there were no supermarkets back in the day. There weren't. You couldn't have 17 choices of cookies, which always provides a great amount of angst for me because I love desserts. And I'm walking down the cookie aisle and I don't know what to do next. But it was much simpler. They had little grocery stores here and there. But now things have become much more Americanized. So I get it. KFC is probably the number one franchise in, I think, all of China now. So it's a different world.
Oh, wow.
But the freedom that we have to watch what we want to do, to say what we want to say, I never quite experienced that abroad, and always was happy to come home. So yes, I tell people sometimes things aren't quite the way they should, but your best education, if you really have the opportunity, is to travel. Because when you travel, you'll appreciate many, many more things than Ed is telling you now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go back. So you went through basketball, what you learned from there, were able to play in college, were able to play not just in the States, but abroad in Canada. So share with us kind of what transitioned you to do next.
Ironically, I went through what I call my Ishmael the Wanderer. I'm not providing any one religion over another. I don't even know where I could find this. It's probably somewhere in the Bible. I don't know. But I always use the phrase Ishmael that represents to people someone who's lost and in the wilderness. Okay, that's just a generic phrase. And I went through a period actually of not knowing what to do and not knowing what I wanted to do forever. And I didn't have a lot of guidance at the time either. So I did a bunch of different things. I actually went to Europe. In fact, this thing behind me here, this is emblematic of one of the things I did in my wandering days. I was a tour guide. How did you get that? Well, I was in Europe and I met a young lady who was our tour guide. She didn't seem particularly bright to me at the time, and still doesn't, but I don't know her name, so I can't mention it. But I thought if she can do it, heck, I can do that. So she said, okay, bring this back to Philadelphia to our office and tell them I sent you. And I did, and they interviewed me. And a month later, I found myself in Athens, in Greece. Oh. And I won't go into all the training and all that, which was pretty much non-existent. It was on the job training. In fact, on the plane over for my first trip of what turned out to be a back-to-back, I spent a month in Athens as a ground tour operator for the American travelers they were sending over. So I'm on the airplane and I'm in the back of the airplane, didn't want to be bothered. And I'm trying to study everything I can about Greece and Athens, but I mean, it was senseless. And some guy who had too much to drink came back and said, hey, buddy, let me buy you a drink. And I said, I really don't drink. And I'm sorry, I don't. And he said, oh, come on. And so finally I said, okay, fine. Give me a club soda with a twist of orange. And he laughed at me, but he came back. And so he talked to me for a few minutes. And he said, so why are you on this plane? And I said, I am, many of the people on this plane are going to Athens, and please don't say anything. I am their tour guide. I really don't know a lot yet about what I'm going to hopefully brief them on shortly. Well, he was drunk and he went out and proceeded to announce to everybody on the plane, hey, here's your tour guide in the back. So people came rushing back and asking me questions. So Ed, what's the best restaurant in Athens? What should I see first, the Acropolis or should I go to Delphi? It was overwhelming. And I usually remember the really bad things and the really good things in my life for some reason. Anyway, that wasn't one of the better chapters, but I digress. So that was one of my missions, to convert from reality of getting a real job. And I loved it. And they came to me and said, Ed, the reviews were great. We got all these letters and people really thought you did a great job. And I thought to myself, well, the guy that was my boss from your company called me every day from Paris to 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning to make sure I was up. And I said, I resented that. And he was rude. And so they said, okay, well, next assignment will be this brand new place that just opened up called Cancun. No one had ever heard of Cancun at the time. This is a long time ago. So they said, but let me tell you a few things about it first. It's brand new. We're sending our first group of people down there, but you got such great reviews. We thought you'd be great. And I said, well, tell me more. And they said, the only problem is, and I said, yes, is that we don't have enough rooms. We don't have enough hotels because there aren't that many hotels in Cancun at that time. So we're going to probably have to ask you to help house them in people's houses. And all I could see was...
Sorry, Mr. So is this like late 70s?
I'm sorry?
Is this 70s or 80s?
Yeah, oh no, this was late 70s.
Late 70s, okay, got it.
Yeah, so they didn't really, honestly, they didn't have much back then. This is going back a long time. So all I could see was trouble. I mean, it was tough enough to do it in Athens because I had people lying to me in Athens. Oh, my wife is she's not doing well, and I thought we could get a room facing the Acropolis that might cheer her up. And I said, I don't have any control over that, sir. I'm sorry. And people lied. But these people were telling me the truth. And I still didn't like it because all I saw myself was calling local people and trying to get rooms for I don't know how many people, but they were bringing a couple of hundred on each trip. They had 256 was the average in Athens. And so I said, based on the treatment I got earlier, but that wasn't the main reason. This sounded like a nightmare. And they wanted to send me there for how many months? Count them, folks.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. And all I saw was headache after headache. And I was exhausted after I got back from Greece. Did learn a lot about history in Greece. Went to Delphi, went to the Corinthian Canal and the Parthenon. I used to take people every week up to the Parthenon and look at the Acropolis. And then every Saturday I would go to the port city of Piraeus, which was about 50 miles from Athens. And we would have boats there. And so this was the port city of Athens. We'd get like 150 people get on the boat. I would make an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, this is your tour guide. And they made me change my last name. They made me change my last. My last name is Iannarella. Ridiculous name. I didn't ask for it. But I cut it in half and I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is on the boat now. This is your tour guide, Iannarella. Sounded weird to me then. And by the way, the boat will be pulling out of here at exactly 2:00. Please don't miss the boat because we can't stop for anybody. Invariably, Ash, we went to 3 different islands and invariably somebody missed the boat. And so they're screaming at us from the docks and we're gently driving and floating away to the next island. So anyway, 1,000,001 stories about that experience, not the least of which is my rule of thumb was go to that island every Saturday for 4 weeks, buy wine, cheese, and bread. Call it a day. It's European. That must work. It does. Take it with me. Walk up these whitewashed steps right here. This is exactly what it looks like. And I got all the way to the top and I looked down on the Aegean Sea. Exhibit B, ladies and gentlemen, right here. Exhibit B. Okay. And it's the most beautiful, purest water I'd ever seen. I grew up in Philly. It was a Schuylkill Expressway. Give me a break. So I could see through the water and I pinched myself. I was, God knows, I was young in my 20s. And I said, Ed, never forget this moment. Pinch yourself. Know that you're up here. You're getting paid. You got wine, cheese, and never forget that you have been here and done that. So that was the end of that.
I love that. So that is that near the end of your kind of time of feeling lost?
Almost. Great segue though. Oh, great segue. We didn't practice this, folks, because I'm impossible to practice with. You just got to go with the flow. No. So in addition to that job and some other jobs, including tour guides of whitewater raft trips in Virginia, I took a job substitute teaching, and I kind of liked it, kind of didn't like it, but it felt like I was half working. I wasn't really at the job yet, but I knew it was kind of better than sitting home. And at that time, they were paying $28 a day for a substitute teacher. And I didn't know that it wasn't that good at the time, but I took it and had a great experience learning to think on your feet, because there really wasn't a lot of teaching going on when you subbed, Ashley. It was a pick up a lesson plan that maybe a teacher left, maybe they didn't. And then you would go from room to room and try to do your best. Some of the schools were a little rowdier than others. One school in particular would not allow me to send anybody to the principal's office. Principals had a do not disturb sign. They didn't want teachers to send them there because it was a rough crowd. And so my main objective in that type of classroom was keeping people from climbing out of the windows to the parking lot. Now, I'm not making this up. So I just had to keep them in line so that they weren't hurting anybody. And so at one point in time, in the beginning of McDonald's commercials on the Big Mac, their original commercial was raw beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. And that was all over the commercials on TV. So everybody memorized it. I still know it to this day. It's crazy how we remember slogans. Like if I had a tube of Crest has been shown to be an effective decay preventive dentifrice that can be of significant value when used in a conscientiously applied program of oral hygiene and regular professional care. Who knows? Anyway, so we're back to this time frame and McDonald's commercials. So I had them line up, and this is the bad class. I had them line up, and they all wanted to recite McDonald's chant. So I'd say, "Okay, come on up next," and they'd come up, and they would say exactly what I said. Some would mess it up, some wouldn't. People would clap if it was great. They'd boom if it was bad. Next, come on up. I'm talking about craziness in the classroom that I don't advocate, and I'm sure it's not that way to this day. It can't be that crazy anymore. But back in the day, it was that. So, okay, fast forward. So I finally, after a year and a half, 2 years of substituting, I thought, my friend at one of the local schools, which happened to be in my hometown, he came to me, Ash, and he said, "Ed, when you're here, these guys love you." I'm not sure why. I'm just telling you what he said. So please don't think it's an ego thing. I don't. But he said, I think there's going to be an opening here and you should consider. And I said, "No, Tom, I'm having fun. I'm free. I'm single. I can go to Europe and work." And finally he kept wearing me down. An opening became available. And I took an opening as an English teacher, which was my major in college. And I did student teaching in college also. So I had some reference point. Well, I went to that school. It was made up of teachers who I had in my classroom. And sadly, some of them said to me, "Ed, get out soon." They said, "Please don't stay. I did this my whole life and it's not worth it." I couldn't believe that was crushing to me. Others embraced me. I met new teachers I hadn't met. And my best friend at that time, at that school, and still one of my best friends today, was Tom Obaldo. And he's the one that got me to take the job. And I thank him to this day. I love you, Tom, because you got me to understand that my calling in life was to help other people in a classroom setting mostly, or a consulting setting secondarily. And that's when the light went on and I said, "This is outstanding. This is what I was meant to do." I figured it out early on. Well, I also figured out early on, Ashley, that my pay was $9,800 a year. So although I am more interested in helping people, I knew that wasn't going to get me where I needed to go to get an apartment, et cetera, et cetera. I knew that it was a low paying job at that time. Doing a lot better today, from what I understand. Yeah, some of my friends are teachers, and they're doing way better than $9,800 a year. So I decided to leave, but I took with me so many things that I can't forget. And one of them is to be fair to people, because people notice what you're doing, and be yourself. When you're in front of a group, when you're in front of investors, when you're in front of your staff, be who you are. Okay, maybe modify it slightly, but basically people can see through who you really are. And if they see through and they don't like what they see, they may tell you that maybe you need a change. Maybe that's a good thing. I learned things that way. but I also learned some amazing things like when you're teaching somebody, helping somebody, wherever it may be, people learn differently. And so I have learned to say things to the same point, but in a different way. And that's because everyone learns through their hearing. Some people learn through their sight. Some people learn from uh, other people's, uh, well, other people's, I call them mentors to me, but the books don't take anything like that that will help guide you. So, in addition to that, I also figured out that it was helpful to be likable in the classroom. When people like you, and this applies to everybody, when you're borrowing money, when you're going for a job increase, when you're doing anything, if people like you and or respect you, you're much more likely to get what you need from others. We're not on an island at all. We're always operating within the context of other people. So we need to recognize that it is a team approach in anything that we do. We can't succeed without others. So the letter team stands for together each achieves more. Okay, so I did learn to be likable and try to please people. And I ended up loving what I did. And so they say if you love what you do, and many people never get there in their lives, I was one of the fortunate ones, then you'll never work a day in your life because it seems like play. It seems like you're on a mission. And I truly believe that. So even with the challenges I have with my health, I'm going to do as much as I can while I'm here. And I want to help some way. Okay, we shift back over. So that was sort of the end of my Lost in Space days. And I ended up being a full-fledged English teacher. But before I ended up being the teacher that I am today, there were some things in between. And I think you have a question or so.
Well, I'm actually, I want to pause there because there's two, you unpacked a lot there, but so there's some questions that came from it. So one is, um, you call that the time of not knowing what you want to do with your life. And there's a lot of people that go through that, especially now in a world where everything is so confusing. I've gotten to the point to where I am, so like, I'm not on TikTok anymore. Sorry. So TikTok is one of the social media apps. It's something that you could get sucked into, and there's just so much thrown at you, right? I'm trying to wean myself off of Instagram and Facebook in a way to where it's like I'm still doing posting stuff that's helpful to people and in real estate, but not allowing myself to consume very much of it because it can confuse you with all the stuff that comes up. So you wonder, all right, people are saying that stuff's gonna crash. It's like, well, what do I do? How do I prepare? And then you just start listening to all these videos, all the things that you can do. So you just end up fearful and confused. And that's how a lot of people are feeling, especially the last few years. And so I think there's a lot of relatability in that. We all go through periods of not knowing what to do. From what I got from your story is that even though you didn't know what to do, you were still doing things. Even if it wasn't what you were going to do for the rest of your life, you put yourself in situations where you are around people, you were growing, you were having experiences. Right now, it's very easy to, instead of going and have experiences, is to sit in front of screens. My husband and I have a 3-year-old, and we are really trying to be intentional in not letting her see us in front of screens a lot. Because, I mean, when we grew up, I know that we are from different generations, but even when I grew up, like I didn't see my parents in front of screens all the time. And I don't want her to think that that's just normal when she's talking to someone, them not even looking at her and looking at the screen. Anyway, so I say that because, again, there's a lot of relatability. And I know there was a time when I felt really confused and lost, and you were one of the first people I reached out to. So when I decided to get out of hotels, it was when the first thought started coming towards, like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I was at my last hotel here in Houston. I called my dad, I called my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and I called you just to get advice. One of the things that you've said, and I've shared this with other people who have called for advice, I'll never forget it, is you told me that, because I didn't have a job lined up, I was like, I want to quit. And you told me, if you quit, know that there's a you may go through where you don't have a job right away. It may take you a few months. And if you get to 6 months from now and you still don't have a job, are you willing to have that struggle over this struggle? And so it's like choosing your hard. And so there have been people like one of my sisters has called where she's felt that, like she's felt lost and doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, all right, well, you have to make some really difficult decisions. And you have to look, hey, if you make this decision, are you okay with this being worst case scenario? And so that I hope that is helpful to people out there. When you feel lost, you feel like all of the options you have are hard. Sometimes you have to choose a hard. And that doesn't
Yeah.
sound like great advice, but unfortunately that's the reality of the world we live in, right? And so I appreciate that you took action.
May I piggyback on that, which I often do?
Of course.
Um, I, is it
Oh,
okay to
go ahead,
pass
go
the
ahead.
mic?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Great points, and there are a lot of lost people. And I would suggest a couple of things. One, uh, before you get into every day when you're going to be lost again, take some time the night before, or if you will, the morning of. But I like the night before personally, but whatever works for you. And think about what you want to do the next day. The next day's occupation, since you may be unemployed at the time, may be just finding job options and filling out Indeed forms and stuff. People often ask me also when I look at a new career or a new job, how do I know when to take it or not take it? So I tell people, look, even if you're not sure, go through the exercise with the prospective employer and go through the motions, unless you absolutely don't want it, but go through the motions. And if you happen to get a job offer, I will tell you that the moment of clarity will hit you. When you get the job offer, you'll think much more clearly about what to do or not to do, and that will force your hand one way or the other. But I always say go through the interviews, go through all the onboarding things if that's necessary. But you do have the option at the end of the day to say, I don't think this is for me. But your thought process will be clarified by that point because the pressure's on. Most deals get done in sports at 11:59 on the night of the expiration date of the negotiations. I would also recommend that you plan some quiet time during your day where it's just you. Maybe some people say yoga is great. I haven't tried it, but that may work for you. But take some quiet time where there's just you for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can spend, and get away from the noise. And especially a good time to do this is at halfway point, right? Halfway point is maybe noonish. And that will assess what you've done up to this point and what you're going to do from this point forward. And you can change what you are wanting to do at that point in time, but have that quiet time. Set goals also, no matter what you're doing. As I said earlier today, set goals that are specific and measurable that you look at frequently, and that will help you guide what you're going to do next. Also, when you get the information about what you might want to do next, talk to other people. The more people, the better. The more people that can give you their viewpoints that you trust, the better off your decision making will be. So I would recommend that as well. And I think TikTok's good that you got off of.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't know if people can see us visually. So your screen, I can see you, but it's a little pink on your side. I'm not sure if you
Yes,
see that as well.
it
I'm okay to
is.
keep going.
I paid extra for this pink screen to come
Okay.
over. No,
It may
actually, I
change.
didn't.
It may
I can
change here
still
in a
see.
little bit, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. I always
Okay.
like pink. Pink was one of my favorite colors.
Yeah.
So I was ending up on the end of my wandering phase.
Mhm.
I got into, I think I really liked teaching. And then I left teaching because of the money. And kind of glad I did because I ended up back where I am today. So when I left and went to the things I talked about earlier today, the Marriotts and the residences, I had to train individuals and I had to help write training programs for those brands. So that was the next level. I wasn't just teaching something out of a book, I was helping to write something. And that's when I really learned the basics of how people learn and why to do it in different ways and how to interject interdisciplinary actions like hands-on and a flip chart or exercise with small groups over here. People learn in a lot of different ways. So that was my segue that ultimately led me in 1994, which would be 28 years ago. I've had my own company, Stonehenge Consulting Group, and I mentioned what I did before. I did work in 8 different countries and 47 states. That's not bad. I think I never got to Montana. I never got to Wyoming and maybe one other state. But I worked in 47 and 8 countries. So I must have been doing something right for people in other lands to want to bring me in. And I was able to employ all of those skills, Ashley, that I had learned along the way in my Stonehenge company. One thing I did learn also that was kind of interesting is that there were 3 things that translated internationally when I was in Aruba or when I was working in Mexico or Central America. I did lots of things there. I learned that music translates well. So I played a lot of music between segments. And I'll answer the music question a little bit later for you. But also magic. I am a part-time magician. I know many of you would like to see me magically disappear from the screen. That's coming up shortly. Don't go away. But I do magic during my seminars just to take their minds off of the heaviness, if there is such a thing. Try to keep it light. I try to keep it light with the third notion, which is humor. So we got music, we got humor, and we've got magic. So all of those things do translate internationally, and surprised. The humor was the biggest surprise to me. I thought you had to have a mental mindset, but evidently not. It startles people into what did I just see, and how does that have anything to do with what we now moved on to? I'm confused. Well, see me at the break, and I'll explain it to you. That's how it works.
That's I want to hit on a few more things because there's a lot that you unpacked a little while ago. So one of them, and you just mentioned it, is understanding that everyone learns differently, or understanding that everyone is different. I think that's really important as you grow as a leader and as you start a business and you have your team around you that's helping you build, understanding how they learn and what motivates them, what they're passionate about. There's a book, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called oh man, I have it here. It's called Powerful by Patty McCord. So she was the first HR director for Netflix when Netflix was just a startup. And so her big thing was that there are times when companies, especially like that, have these special projects, and it's going to take them a while. So one of their big projects was to how do you get the bandwidth and the enough space to house that much content on your platform and everyone using it. And so once they got it, there were a lot of team members that they had brought on specifically that were trained and were knowledgeable to get that accomplished, but there was nothing really left for them to do. And they weren't contract workers, they were actual Netflix employees. And so she went into being able to have conversations with people to see, like, to say, what is it that you want to do? What's the next thing you'd like to accomplish to help them move on, and not just say, okay, well, we can't really use you anymore, and let them go or lay them off or whatever. And so I think there's a lot to be said about being able to understand your people, one, so that you get the most out of them, but two, so that they're giving you the most of themselves and excited about that. Another part to that is, when you talk about understanding what motivates people, the company that I worked out when I met you, they were really good about when it came time for me to grow in something or me to transition in something, the way they came about it was they knew what I wanted and they knew what my goals were already. I remember there was a hotel that they moved me to downtown. It's not a brand that I was crazy about. But when they approached me about it, I was like, I don't like that brand. I just don't, it's not me. And they're like, yeah, but you know what? You want to be downtown and you want full service. This is your opportunity. Take the chance. And then from there you can move. And I did. And so I was grateful for the fact that they knew me, they understood me, they gave me an opportunity to grow. So I was able to benefit them. They were able to benefit me. And to second that with that company, because that company was built a lot of my foundation. Um, when I was making that transition to become a director of sales, they had sent you to spend time with me, but there were things that I was doing and they were, proud of what I was doing, especially by myself. And they knew that family was really important to me. And so the owner of the company was like, well, let's get Ashley something. And my general manager at the time was like, don't worry, I already know what to get her. And it wasn't even anything for me. My sister at the time was going to go on that trip. I think it was no, it wasn't at that time. She went on a different trip out of overseas. And they're like, we know that you're helping your sister with that trip, so we want to help you to give that to her. So it wasn't even something that was like, hey, Ashley, here's this whatever trinket we went and bought for you. It's, hey, I cried because it was so intentional. And when you understand your people, the effort, the energy that they give back to you is so different. So different when you understand your people and know them and are intentional with them. That's all I got. That's that point.
That's awesome because it segues naturally. You're a consultant and you would have a segue. It segues into a couple of things. Number one, there was a great author named Stephen Covey, and he wrote a bunch of books, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, which I highly recommend. But one of his basic principles was seek first to understand, then to be understood. Terrific way of saying 2 ears, 1 mouth. Seek first to understand. So one of the throwback techniques that I learned at Marriott in my early career was a great device for anyone who's a leader that has people reporting to them or whatever, was a quarterly wrap session. And rap has nothing to do with the Sugar Hill Gang, which I really love. Hip hop, hippie to the hippie, to hip hip to hoppy. You don't stop the rock. Don't get me started. I could do the whole thing. That or it would be ludicrous to mention even another rapper. I won't even go there. So quarterly rap session has to do with rapport. And rapport is important because whatever we do, there is a cycle to it. We begin with building rapport with other people, which makes it easier to, number 2, ask them questions. Tell me about yourself. So rapport leads to asking questions. After you find out the information, if you're in sales, who isn't? When you're in sales, after you find the information of what they really need, because you were empathetic and because you built rapport first, now you can go into step 3, which is us talking about our product and service. That's when we do it, not before, but after we learn about what they need, and then go on to the closing step later. So what this actually is very simply a manager and someone who reports to them. Doesn't matter what your title is, and you don't have to do it with everybody, maybe only a few select people. You get with them 4 times a year. You don't like 4, do it twice. I'm just saying how we did it at Marriott. But whatever you do is better than none. And instead of the once a year traumatic experience of the once a year review, when we typically reward people who did really, really great in the last quarter, we remember that last quarter more than we remember what happened before. So we tend to make them feel better about themselves than they should. When you get with them, find out if they're able to meet away from their normal station, if you will, in a neutral situation, and get them to take a note and a notepad and ask them questions like this. Okay, where do you see us? Are we helping you as a company or not? Um, what can I do better in my job to help you be better? What problems are you having? Are you having any personnel problems with somebody else? Um, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, you may only want to ask that the first time you do this, not every quarter or however you do it. And so, how do you think you're doing? Ask them what they think their performance is, and in the last quarter, and then let me tell you how I think you did in the last quarter. So, if this happens to be a once a year, you only do it once a year, and you do this procedure, that's okay. But I recommend doing it at least twice a year minimally, so you have something to fall back on from your memory. And we don't want to punish somebody who's had a bad month or so for something they did earlier in the year that was phenomenal, or vice versa. So these notes help keep things in perspective. They write up a short note saying, "Here's what I learned from our time together, Ed," and then I look at it, I read it, I sign off on it, and if I think something's missing in there, I'll add it to it, send it back to them. You read it. Are you okay with what I wrote? Okay, fine. Now we have this document that says twice a year, 4 times a year, whatever. This is what we talked about. So the next time we get together with them, we pull out the document and we see, how did you do on this? Okay, what have you improved upon? And you find out that the second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth get very easy. They're easier than the first or second one, because now people know they have the option to speak freely. They trust you by now. They know a little bit more about their job, your job. And oftentimes it's, let's just get this list over with, Ed. Let's just go through it. I already talked to you about the problem I had with my computer last week, so you already know that. But generally, not with all cases. With some people that are problem children, that will go on indefinitely. There'll always be problems. I get that. But back to the freedom of another country, or the freedom at your own company. That quarterly action plan is one of the best tools that I've ever used. And it's simply because people know that they can have a voice with our company and with you. And that really makes it easier to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I love that that's very something practical that all employers, leaders listening can do. Um, for sure. There's another one that you had mentioned earlier. Um, you'd mentioned and encouraged people to write down their goals. And I think this is another thing. If you're going through a season, any season that you're in, right? Whether you feel lost or whether you're starting to build, you know that you can write things out. One of the things we did this year for the first time ever. So we write down our goals every year, my husband and I, but it's like you write them down and then you get to the end of the next year and you're like, well, did we do it? What did we do? Last year we had 5 or 6 goals. We accomplished 2 of them. This year it's been a little bit different because we've put them up. We have them. We've actually put them up. They're up in the office. They're up in our rooms. And so now we even gave Blair some this year, and so she has some in her room. But so it's this thing now that we're going into this year so much more focused on it because we see it. We're talking about something right now this week. My husband and I, he's already starting to make moves on something that I didn't think would happen till later in the year. But I think again, because it's so fresh, he's like, you know what? I don't even think it's going to take us that long. We could do it faster. When I think, had we not even had it in front of us, it may have been something that wouldn't happen till next year. So just even if right now you feel lost and you don't even know what you want to accomplish next year, baby steps. What's something small that you can do this year? And it doesn't have to be job related, right? So you had made a great comment, Ed, about what is it that you want to get done tomorrow, whether it is finding job prospects, whether it is meeting with someone you think that could provide you some value, whether it's you serving someone in some different way. There's so much that you could put on that list. And if it's in front of you, there's so much that can get accomplished. So I have a question for you, Ed. Is there anything that you've ever written down uh, on your list of like goals that may have seemed really crazy when you wrote it down, and then when you accomplished it, like you just came out so proud of yourself?
Well, my first one was in high school. I wrote down my goal of getting a scholarship, and I got a 4-year scholarship. I got rid of I didn't tell you, but when I got all the ego letters from all these massive, famous universities, colleges, and coaches that I knew, I just put them aside. I don't know whatever happened to them, but yeah, that was the first time I set a goal, and achieving it probably helped me understand the power of the goal, but I didn't know why at the time. Fast forwarding through my career, I did notice a lot of things. I didn't have much of a goal when I was with Marriott because I was young and single, and they moved me to Fort Lauderdale, and that was I think I remember part of that stay there. That was just a lot of fun, but not really goal oriented. It wasn't until I got to Residence Inn and they challenged me to put together a training program that I finally started saying to myself, well, whoa, I went from one property where I was director of sales of maybe a dozen people to now what eventually ended up being 100 hotels before I left. And I have to put together a training program. Well, I better have some goals written down. So I went around the country to all sorts of different major corporations that put together training programs. And ironically, after traveling to and fro, I ended up in New York City with a division of McGraw-Hill, and they had a trade tech training technology, trade tech division that we signed with. I didn't want to do it, but I did it because they were the best of all that I'd seen, of 5 or 6. And the reason I didn't want to do it is because I had just left Marriott. I didn't want the same company to deal with me over here. So I told them on the front end, look, I know Marriott's a great company, but we're going to have to be a little bit different, for myself and others that we're going to bring in from Marriott to the Residence Inn. So they did. And most of what they brought over was Marriott. And I'm confessing this publicly for maybe the first time. So I knew what worked at Marriott really well. And it was this 4-step process I alluded to earlier: build rapport, qualified, sales presentation, close the deal. But I was able to modify it enough that we used it at Residence Inn, a lot of the fundamentals, but we tailored it to extended stay. And that was the second major time in my life when I had to set a goal. There were other intermediary, less important goals at the time, maybe going back to when I was running a management company, and not only did I oversee 8 hotels, but I oversaw 8 Cinnabon bakeries in 3 different states. And by the way, when I traveled to those bakeries, wearing not my hotel hat, but my Cinnabon hat, someone had to be the taste tester. So naturally, I volunteered. So I would always, before I left that night, I would always take a roll and eat it. And to wash it down, as they say, I got a mocha latte chill. And I had to drive sometimes 5 hours back to where I live, sometimes 3 hours from wherever the bakeries were. There were 3 states. And if I drank that mocha latte chill way before everything you have now available to amp you up, that did the job. So I had the sugar high going. I add to that the caffeine, and I get home at 2 a.m, and my wife was sleeping, and I'd say, Kim, and by the way, I'll tell you about her in a minute. Kim, how you doing? How's your day going? What's going on? And she said, it's the 1 o'clock, and what are you doing? I couldn't sleep. But I have to do a quick thank you to Kim, because I wouldn't be here today. By the way, I haven't told you this yet. Telling you now, I have had cancer back in 2003, 2004, different type of cancer, tonsil cancer. Got through that for 14 years. And I've had 10 cancers since 2018, 10 separate stage 3 or stage 4 cancers. And I'm still here, I'm still standing, but I wouldn't be here without the love of my life and the love of from my wife. And I just want to do a quick commercial. That's the end of that. You know I love you. I'm the reason I'm here. You're the reason it's going to help me stay on a little longer, because I think there's something left in the tank that we have to share with other people.
Mm.
So that's that. Now, in the world of working for Hilton, which I didn't mention, I worked for 10 years for Hilton while I was, during my current phase of my own company, Stonehenge Consulting. I did training for thousands of people, literally, over the course of 12 straight years that I was there as an outsourced consultant. So I know a little bit about sales. If you need any help, guys, I'm here. But I couldn't help. That was a shameless plug. But I did have to set a lot of goals with them. In fact, I had to set goals for each module that we taught. I had a specific action step and goals and what the takeaways were from what I was teaching. Really highly detailed. And they taught me to be really professional because it was a giant organization. And the bigger your organization is, you're going to have more stuff like this. The smaller the organization, not so much at first. Focus on relationships. Everybody, including the big guys. We tend to lose sight at the big corporations, but we can't. We must always keep that going. And that's why my favorite company that I ever worked for was Residence Inn Company, founded by Jack DeBoer, who every day would make it a point in Wichita, Kansas, to come to our cubicles and say hi to every one of us in the company. And I'll never forget that. And so that type of fellowship with other people will lead to fellowship from them to you. You show them fellowship, they'll show you the fellowship.
Yeah.
So that's
that's very true. I love that. So you've shared a lot of lessons that you've experienced along the way and all of the chapters of your life. But so when it comes to you being a trainer and mentor to, employers, investors, business owners, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken during that time? Because you've worked with people all over the country, overseas. What are some nuggets that you've learned from them, or that in that experience you've learned?
okay. I would go back to first and foremost. I'm a relationship guy. I believe in technology. Trust me. Can't be here without it. We're doing it. And I love technology, but sadly enough, too many business owners tend to think that technology will solve their problems. And maybe in some businesses they may. Who knows about arbitrage, ratings, and advertising? I don't know. But in most other businesses, we provide a service or a product. We must learn that relationships are key. People will do more for you if they like you and or respect you.
Yeah.
I said that before. I'll say it again because it's that important. So that's important. The next step would be the listening first. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Make sure you know whoever it may be, whatever the lenders are looking for, what are they looking for specifically? Be very detailed. Ask them a million questions. If it's the end user of your product or service, what are they looking for? We tend to forget that. We tend to assume we know everything about our hotel guest. But in actuality, it's a good idea to maybe meet with them at your hotel once in a while. Sit them down, give them a cup of coffee, buy them a water, give them something off for free out of your sweet shop if you have one. But talk to them. How was your stay? Be honest with me. I'm the owner. Tell me what you want. You'll get some great input that way. So that's important. Now, I don't want to underestimate the importance of metrics, because realistically, I went back to my other statement that we're in business to make money. Money frees us to do many things. So there have to be metrics, and that's part of technology as well as just fundamentally knowing where we stand. So today's business person, more so than when I was growing up, has to understand that there's a million ways to measure things now, and they're going to be everywhere found, including social media. So we are going to have to learn to do that, but without the noise that Ashley mentioned earlier. We have to find quiet time away from that to get us recycled halfway through the day. Great time. What do I have left on my to-do list? Okay, how can I alter the to-do list from this morning? I didn't get to it because I got too many phone calls. Let's reassert that at the end of that 12 o'clock time frame. So yeah, when you're guiding other people, again, be decisive. I mentioned the importance of being decisive. That goes a long way. Recognize also that as much as I'd like to say that relationships and building rapport with your people are important, don't lose sight of the fact that we're in a war, a WAR war. In fact, that was a card game I played when I was, I don't remember how it worked. But when you're in business, you automatically, unless you're some bizarre business I don't know about, you're going to have competitors. Okay, so I highly recommend you identify who your competitors are and then understand them. Spend a lot of time knowing who they are. Because in essence, yeah, you could be friends with the hotel next to you. Maybe you go out and have drinks together, but nonetheless, they are the enemy. Don't like to use that word enemy because it has negative connotations, but they're vying for the same market share. Does that sound better? Oh, you like that better? Okay, great. They're vying for the same market share that you are. So call them whatever you want, but understand that when we are at war, we stay at war. War doesn't end unless you're so far at the top of the scale and that nobody's even close to you. And that happens on rare occasions. But make sure you pass that along in your own ways, that it's about making money to pay you and to pay others. And all the way along there, when you get the chance, insert all of the other humanistic things that I'm actually bigger on than just earning money. I do a lot of pro bono work around the country. So I do things for free a lot. And I'm happy to spend time with some of you. If you want to call me, I'm happy to share ideas with you as well. No charge. I just want you to know that those relationship things need to be interspersed with make money, make money. I see too many companies now, especially in the hotel industry. My wife works for, can't mention it. She works for a company that's huge, and they're always looking at bottom lines, top lines. Who are your accounts? What did you do? They don't really spend as much time as I think they should on thanking people. Just a simple thank you.
Yeah.
People, here's another point. I read a book by Daniel Pink called it's called Motivation. And in that book, he talks about what motivates people. And he hit on one point that was really important. And it was that some people learn extrinsically and some people learn intrinsically. So I'm listening, but I had never heard that. And Daniel Pink, not just through his opinions, but through metrics and through technology, he was supporting a notion that was a little different, but he was backing it up because today we all need to know the why behind the what. And so technology and metrics do help. So he substantiated, here's the difference. It goes back to my Latin days. Why did I love my Latin teacher? What's Latin? We never heard of it. I'm sorry, but it's an old language that the Romans, my ancestors, I'm Italian, so they were using Latin back in the day, 2,000 years ago. Great people, a little hostile in the Colosseum. I've been there, scary. But I was taught Latin in junior high school. They don't even teach it anymore. But I learned my English language from Latin, and I love my Latin teacher. So every day we'd stand out in the hall. He loved basketball, and we'd talk about basketball. And people inside the classroom were giving me the thumbs up sign through the window. They could see I was stalling for time. They loved it because they hated Latin. But that was then. So X, EX, and IN are from Latin. Oh, we knew there was a tie-in somewhere, and you'd get to it sooner or later. I just did. So X means away from, far away from, different from, like ex-wife. I have one of those too. Can't mention. I don't remember her name. So excommunicate, expatriate. So it means away from those people. Thankfully, and then in means I'm there with you. It's inside of you. Okay, it comes from within you, as opposed to externally. So most people are externally driven. If you're looking for leaders, try to find the intrinsic ones. What does that mean? Okay, I'm getting to that. Extrinsic means people are motivated by other things. In most cases, it's money. In most companies, they think money is the biggest motivator. You read this book by Daniel Pink, you won't think that anymore. I don't anymore. He said there's so many other things like recognition and thanks to people that are so far more important to them in the long run. Short term, yes. Short term, everybody's jumping on the extrinsic. How do I get more money? How do I win that contest? But after a while, it doesn't motivate them anymore.
Yeah.
Intrinsically is far more important. So extrinsically are things from outside of us that try to motivate us. Intrinsically are much harder to understand and harder to do. But they are the things that make me think back on my own career, and the careers of others that I've talked to. And that there are things like, I want to prove my parents right. They thought I was going to be something someday, and I didn't know when I was wandering through the Ishmael period of my life. But I think that if they were alive today, and hopefully you are somewhere, and know that intrinsically I wanted to do the right thing for the right reason, to maybe help other people, to maybe help them realize their goals. If I can help realize someone else's goals, they'll make it a lot easier for me to realize my own goals, especially if you're in business with somebody. You take care of someone else and they'll take care of you, but think of them first and foremost. So another intrinsic goal was, aside from knowing that, might be something like, that eighth grade teacher said I would never amount to anything. And I wanted to prove that guy wrong my whole life. And now I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna do it in my own way. But things that are intrinsic to you are there with you all the time. Having high ethics, having high integrity. Those are the things that will drive us. And if something appears wrong on the surface, you don't need a manual or a metrics chart to tell you that it's wrong. You'll know that it's wrong. And that comes more from your intrinsic motivation. I really, really wish you get to read that book by Daniel Pink. Just type in Pink, P-I-N-K, Daniel Pink. And the title, I read it a long time ago, was How to Motivate People, I think was the title, How to Motivate People. And
we'll put it in the link below.
Yeah, do that. But mind-boggling things that he said that I never would have guessed about running a business, having a company, and understanding what motivates other people. And in the final analysis, we do have to motivate other people. I think that's kind of where we're going. So I think there's some of the main things I wanted to highlight.
Okay. And I want to piggyback on that really quick, Ed, just when it goes back to, motivating people and understanding people differently. So my husband and I have learned a lot about each other, like in any marriage, but we realize more and more just what drives us. And it's two very different things. So even when you look at when we have or have had employers, so for him, he appreciates literally just being acknowledged and someone saying thank you. He was we both met in hotels. So he was a director of revenue, so he's very much a numbers guy. I'm the salesperson. And so he was at a hotel for a while where, well, he's been at a few hotels where it's all about the numbers. It's all like about the KPIs. And he gets that. And you're only as good as the numbers that you did yesterday. So if they were really great yesterday, well, they better be really great today and tomorrow, whatever. And so the last few hotels he's worked at, it's just been like that. And so he's just always has to prove himself. And at this one, he's this one that he is at now, the ownership is different. The management company is just different. And so he was on guard a lot in the beginning just to make sure that he proved himself. There was nothing they could call him out on. And now, like, they're doing things intentionally to show appreciation. And for him, the intentional things, literally someone will send him an email from like corporate or something. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, to me, that wouldn't get me. That, like, to me is like, oh, those are just words. You probably like copy and pasted that to someone, right? To me, I have to show me, do something. And that's why the company that, I met you, that introduced me to you, they were very intentional to me. And even when I was making the transition to become a director of sales, they flew you out to spend a whole day with me. To me, that showed that, hey, they're actually investing in me and see something in me. And so it's interesting when you get to understand your people. If you're able to be intentional in different ways, in very specific ways, you really do get just different work ethic from them. It really does. And it changes the whole energy of the environment. Because even in that hotel that I started out at there, we had a general manager who, to this day, and I don't use this phrase for many people. I can count on one hand the number of people I say this about. He was a man of character and integrity. And it's someone that we all would have taken a bullet for because we so appreciated him and the way he led. And there were times where we would have QAs where, the quality assurance had come every, twice a year or whatever, and everyone pitched in. I remember front desk people staying late to like help with the grout in the floor. Like, everyone was like, hey, I'll do whatever I can. How do you need me? I'll stay late. I'll come in early. It doesn't matter, because we so cared about that. I don't think that happened at any other hotel within the portfolio where people actively initiated that and said, hey, do you need, like, asked instead of having to be asked. And so I think it speaks a lot to, as a leader, as you grow, knowing and understanding your people, because it creates an environment of people being known and heard and understood, and them
Yes.
reciprocating that to you.
Well, the Bobby Knight theory of coaching basketball. Oh, back to basketball again. It's the last time, promise. He says, my way or the highway. Okay. And he was known for that. And eventually, he moved on for throwing a chair across the room at a game. But the best managers that I have ever seen have learned to find out what's important to each person on their team, find a little something, and highlight that when you talk to them, so they know you know them a little bit personally. My wife and I did the same thing you and your husband did. We've been working together since 1994 at our company, and she is a director of sales as an outsourced consultant, but she still works for us. But I just worked for your old company in July, and it's in Texas. And I bonded with the group, and there were 10 hotels in the training. And I got a package in the mail that really hit me here. And it was a thank you basket. And each of the 10 hotels put something in there that was about their hotel, and or wrote something on it about me to thank me for what I did for them. So I get thanks all the time in different ways. My wife, on the other hand, doesn't. And she has booked so much business way beyond that because her expertise wasn't extended stay. And she's done it since COVID started in 2020. And she's killing her budgets. But all she wants is a simple thank you. And she tells me that every day. I wish they appreciate it. I just wish they'd thank me. It's so simple, guys. It's simple, and it's free.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I want to transition, but I want to ask a question. So you brought up Miss Kim. You've given a great advice on leadership, on sales, all of that stuff. Is there any advice you can give about marriage? Because you guys have had, obviously, there's a lot to your marriage because you guys have been married for a while. You guys have gone through your cancer together. and you guys are still like helping people, working with companies around the country, and you guys run a company together. So shed light on whatever advice that you can for marriages. There's a lot of the people that we're friends with and who listen to this have marriages where they're working together, right? They have businesses together, or one of them has a business, the other one is support, whatever that looks like. So share, or there's also those that go through really hard times. And I have no doubt that there are a lot of tough conversations you guys have to have when it comes to cancer. So shed light on some of that and what encouragement you'd give to marriages out there.
Yeah, it also extended back to 2006 when my wife and I were taking a Saturday and driving to a relative's house to help them. They were elderly. And we got sidetracked. I got lost, got the map out. And we were trying to get back on the main highway, and a car driving at a high speed crashed into someone from the opposite direction, and his car ricocheted into our car. We were stopped at a traffic light, just waiting for the light to change. And as a result of that, my wife has been in a wheelchair since 2006 and has done amazing things. I don't look at her as disabled. She is incredible, and that will segue into the next part. So you never know what's around the corner. I know some people are glad that they go to work and then come back, but we work together and have for 28 years, and we're still standing. And we have had many bad and good conversations on all sorts of topics. So you are absolutely right. So I think it comes down to being totally honest and communicating frequently. Now, since we're in the same business, we talk about what she did, what I did during the day, different types of the same hotel business. She's working remotely for properties, and I'm training all over the country. So we talk about things that we've learned that day, things that were drastically wrong, things that were drastically right. And so that helps us a great deal. It's a little easier also on our focus of where we want to go time-wise, and even back then vacation-wise. We haven't been on one for 2006, so 17 years. But we tend to like similar things more than most people. We like the same types of shows on TV. We like same types of music, all those things. You may even want to ask me about those in a minute, but we do have differences. Clearly, you can't have a marriage without differences. So we establish some rules. Okay, some of the rules, one of us likes better than the other. We contribute to the rules. One of the rules is if we disagree and it's going to get heated, we don't yell, keep our volume down, and speak honestly, speak openly, and speak honestly, and tell me what you'd like to get out of this. Now I know I sound like a consultant, and oftentimes she'll say that to me. Don't treat me like a consultant. I mean, you're not my consultant, you're my husband. So I get all that, but my mind thinks very similarly. And if I wanted to work, the best, I need to, where are we going with this discussion? Sometimes it's just, I want to vent. So I've learned over the years that there are times, more so with her than me. I don't think it's genetic. Some of you men in the audience may disagree, I don't know. But just to say, I just need to vent. And many times she's gone beyond that and said, I don't need you to fix me. I don't know. And I keep saying, but I got all these charts and graphs, and I've talked to other people because I mentor other people. No, I don't want that. Just listen to me. So I've had to tone that down.
Yeah.
I had to tone it down, and it's hard for me because I just want to help. I want to help everybody. because I can, I didn't tell you this, but selfishly, I want to help. Selfishly, it helps me. It's
Yeah.
what makes me feel good, knowing I did a good job or knowing I didn't do a good job. I look at my results from my training, and even back in the days of Hilton, and I think I got the highest scores they ever had, 98.6 on all scores. But I look for the what's the point four? What's the 1.4? I look for the things that are wrong. I go right to them. I skip over the we love Ed stuff on his magic was great and all that. I skip over that and I go right to the ha ha. Look what Ashley said about Ed. Ha ha. You know, he didn't like the way he dressed. We didn't like his glasses, or we didn't like the fact that he only gave us 10 minutes instead of the 20 that he promised us. I don't, I mean, there's a lot more than that, but I always wanted to know what I did wrong. So I do get great pleasure in helping others, and that translates even in my quote unquote quarterly rap sessions with my wife that occur daily. So
Yeah. No, I love it. So our marriage isn't like that in the sense towards like we want to fix things, but sometimes Brendan has all these ideas. And so he'll throw one out there and I'm just like, okay, all right, so how do we do that? Let's start and he's like, well, no. And so I'm like ready to say, okay, well, what do I need to do to make it come out? And so for him, it's like, no, it's just an idea. I was like, then why would you say it? Like, why would you say it if it's not something we're doing right now? And so we've had to understand how to talk through certain things like that. He threw one at me in December. And literally I had planned out my entire year already of like broken into quarters of what we're doing per quarter, right? And so he threw this one out and I'm like, what? Okay, which quarter does that fit into? And what are the steps to get to that quarter? What do I need to do? And I got frustrated and he's like, sorry, I shouldn't have even brought it up. I was like, no, it's okay. It's just, are you being serious? Is that something we're really pursuing or is that not? And so those are the conversations in our house. But I want to
well,
hit on something else. Sorry, go
oh
ahead.
yeah. Yeah, just one
The-
quick point. So
yeah.
you're training one individual. I just happen to train groups, but the points are the same. I think you're going to find that as time goes by, one of your greatest legacies in life will be what you leave him behind. So, and I know you'll do a great job because I know who you are. I know you're a great communicator and have a lot of effervescence in life. And you're going to be remembered more for that than for everything else you did in business, I think. Although you will do great things in business, I have no doubt about that. Not from the first day I met you, not today, and not tomorrow. I'm sorry. You were going to go on to something
No,
else.
no, I appreciate that because I mentioned earlier when I've had transitions in my life, the three calls that I make are my dad. So sorry. I think I was really trying not to get emotional on this one. My dad, my husband, and you, because your opinions matter a lot to me, and I know that you guys will help guide me. So I really appreciate that you say that. But I want to go back to you mentioned that uh, you want to know what you did right and what you did wrong, and it makes me think of advice that you gave me when I was first when we had first met. You said when it came to sales and when it came to cold calling, take it serious, but don't take it personal. So do you want all the information? You take everything that people tell you seriously to pick it apart, dissect it, but don't take it personal because if someone says something harsh to you, it's a lot of times it's not you, it's them. And so I've applied that to not just business, but so much of my life, and it's advice that I've given other people. And so that one's helped me a lot because there are going to be times where people are going to critique you in a way that you're like, I don't think that's beneficial. I think they're just being picky. And so you move on. I've gotten to where like there are people who call me after. I have a friend of mine who will call me after each podcast and she'll pick it apart. And I'm like, okay, that's good. No, I appreciate that. And so I've been able to tweak a lot of stuff. Right. And so I've been cautious and even who I get critiques from with the podcast or anything that I do, because I want it to be people who know how I want to grow and can provide the feedback that I know I need to hear, even when it's not great.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it's a little harsh, but when you put it in that perspective, as we talked about, don't take it personally. It will help you grow. And if you don't ask that question, or if they don't tell you, you're going to grow slower. That's all. So
Mhm.
suggestion boxes, if they even exist, or some quarterly action plan modified to your own liking will be fine. Uh, but communicate with people, find out what we can do better, tell them that some things cannot be done better because financially we can't afford that just yet. Maybe that's the case. But for other things, it may be as simple as recognize me, make me the employee of the month, uh, give me more job responsibility. Sometimes even that will motivate people more than externally doing things. Not even with a pay raise, just I want to be important in this organization. Thank me, tell me how I can do better, promote me, and 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 I will do better. And I
Yeah.
know I will. And that's how people think.
I love that, and I love that you even mentioned the suggestion box. And suggestion box. I know that you're talking a lot about um, employees and employers and that relationship, and you touched on the customer-employer relationship a little while ago. And I want to go back to that because of what you just said with the suggestion box. I know that there are businesses that have that. There is a really big company, a really big brand. We don't eat a lot of fast food, but there's one in particular. There's two in particular that we allow our daughter to eat. And so one of them has a suggestion box, and this is one that I won't say the name, but we all know, and we all know they have a really great customer service. And there was one particular location we went to where the service was just off. They didn't smile, they weren't. And I put something in the suggestion box because I was like, and I pretty much said like, this is so not on brand, and it really affects the experience. And I want to speak to I know customer service is just it's hurting so bad right now, more than I think it ever has. And it's gotten to where I feel like if we see things that are off and we see just terrible attitudes, no smiling, all of that stuff. It's like you want to tell them, but you also know that this person, even if they bring the manager out, like once you see the manager, you can just tell by their body language that as soon as you give this feedback, they are just going to not even take you serious, and it just infuriates you even more. So I would say to any business owners that are listening, managers, anything like that, like that stuff matters. There are people, there's feedback you need to hear because it will help you in your business, but
Yes.
understand that it only infuriates customers more when you don't listen to them. Even there are some people that say really ridiculous stuff, and that we're in a culture where everyone expects things to be perfect and fast and in the way that they like it, and that's not realistic all the time. And but there are people who have genuine feedback that if you just took it, even if it comes off a little harsh, could do great things for your business. So that's the encouragement I want to give, because that is a massive thing right now. There's another, and I'll let you piggyback off of this. There's another brand that we've been eating at since my daughter could start eating solids, because it's just, again, it's a really popular brand, but it's one of those fast food restaurants that's a little bit healthier. We let her eat some of it, and we've gone to them all over the state. So my husband's from Lubbock, so when we go to Lubbock, we stop at a few on the way. We've been to all the big cities, been to it in all the big cities, and it's consistently inconsistent to where it's just the tables are dirty, everything's, and there was one here that we go to, and we've stopped going to it for a while because we'll ask the manager for something, and we're just waiting. And there are times where there's like no clean tables. I've gotten to where I take wipes now, and so I'll even see someone walking around trying to look for a clean table. I'm like, here, do you need a wipe? Like, I told them about it. They said someone's coming out. I haven't seen anyone, and it's gone to where it's that bad, and you want to tell someone because you already told them. What can you do? So I know that you do a lot with customer service, and you help brands strengthen their customer service. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on what's going on right now, and what encouragement can you provide?
Well, first of all, I actually used to critique telemarketers and give them instant feedback. I used
Mm-hmm.
to literally, I stopped doing it, but people would call in and say, hello, Mr. I am an umbrella. They couldn't pronounce
Oh
Iannarella,
yeah.
so they say whatever. Mr. I am an umbrella. So I'm representing this XYZ steak company, and we have this special going on and on and on. They talk for 15 minutes, maybe not. Okay, they talk for 3 minutes. And finally, they have to stop. Why? Because they need to ask for the sale. So they know they have to stop. And then this is where I take over. Um, so, uh, did you say your name was John? John, yes, John. Hi, John. listen, thanks for offering. By the way, I'm a vegetarian, so I'm not interested in your steaks, which is true, by the way. So, but I wanted to make a few points. I'm a trainer, I'm a consultant, and I think you have a tremendous voice for what you're doing. And I want, if you don't mind, do you mind me sharing a few things? No, go ahead. So, okay, so John, your voice is pleasant. You can't teach that. It just sounds so sing-songy and uplifting. Some people, I say this to, their voices are monotone. They sound like this, but yours is great. So congratulations on that. And then I know what you're doing. I know you have a script in front of you because I also hire people like you for my business. So I know what you're doing and you have this. But when you talk to people like me, could you please make it sound a little matter of fact? Not quite as much of the actual script. Now, maybe they're not allowed to and they can't, and that's the fault of leadership. But if you just make it sound a little more down to earth, people will respond to you better. They'll see that you're human, and don't not pause. You should pause. Pause is a very helpful technique. And I'm going on and on and on. And at the end, I remember one young lady said to me, wasn't John, it was a young lady. There was a pause that she did use, and I said, hello. And she said, Ed, I'm so amazed that you took the time to help me. This is so good for me. I just don't know how to thank you. And I said, you don't have to thank me. You know, it already came to me myself. I knew that. And so she hung up, but yes, I used to critique people and I don't anymore. By the way, I would say one thing about partners that I don't want to forget. Pick your partners as carefully as you pick your spouse.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to live with them for X number of years, make sure you don't just do where's the money coming from, understand the intrinsic nature of the individual. Take longer time than you normally would because you live with them. And I've had bad partners and I've paid for it over the years financially, but I've learned some tremendous lessons about that too. So enough of that. So yes, obviously my wife and I noticed the same thing, Ashley, that you do. She travels with baby wipes and everything else too. So you're not alone. And she also deals with it in the hotel industry. God knows it's hard to find front desk people in almost any business nowadays. You know, people are staying home and doing things from home and they're not working as much. So it's hard to find good people. So when you find somebody good, then take all the things we talked about, like rewarding them with thank yous and other opportunities. And if you want more, call me. Give you a whole list of things. I have a book called 5,001 Ways to Reward Employees. It's a tremendous book. And it used to be 1,001 Ways, but they rewrote it and they updated it to 5,001. And it'll give you so many great ideas about that. So partner is important. Hiring the right people, especially leaders in your company. Spend more time. Don't just do 5 minutes on a call, 10 minutes on a call. Spend an hour with them on one call. Meet them if you can. Fly them in if you're able. You know, you can meet in person better than you can. This is why Zoom has done so well and other video chats. We don't get quite the experience of in person, but it's the next best thing. So spend time with people. It's worth it. And then define what you expect out of your business or service. Define what you want from your, I'll say customer service, but I don't use that term much anymore. I've changed my webinars and my live programs to guest loyalty because we have found out that there's a huge difference between the two. There's so many studies done about people that we think are loyal to us, but they're really not. They leave in a heartbeat. You know it now from employees you have that went to McDonald's instead of staying in a high-tech company or whatever. They leave for different reasons. But actually 87% of people who left and went somewhere else said that they were actually satisfied with the place they were at before, but they went for more money or something else. But 97% of people who are loyal to you are loyal for life. They're hard to find, they're not easy to find, but they're worth the time of investment. And there's a lot of things that we can't go into today that will tie into that, and which I'm happy to help you with on the phone. Okay. But they need to be trained. First, they need to know what your expectations are. Sometimes you have an employee manual. I'm okay with that, but someone should review key points with them. Can't just hand them the manual, have them sign it and send it in. That's what happens most of the time. Yeah. So find out what you want them to do, specifically job descriptions, what you want them to do ethically, morally, and intrinsically. That's got to be in there somewhere. And then train them. And train them again if they need more training. But training is not enough. I used to think it was, because that's what I have been most of my life, a trainer. You must monitor the training. You can only do so much on the front end. They say who they are, I don't know, that people forget 75% of what they've learned within 48 hours. That's a lot to forget within 48 hours. That's most people's learning capacities. So you need to monitor people on a regular basis. For some people, it may be once a month. For others, it could be once a week, every hour. It just depends on your business model. But someone, doesn't have to be you, could be someone you hire to monitor them. That's where we get department heads and managers. I get all that. But make sure that the people that are closest to the ground, the closest to the customer, in our case, actually, that would be front desk people mostly. Make sure we don't train them enough. And they're the closest ones to hearing what guests are actually thinking. So we should do more of that type of training, followed up by monitoring. And that will give you the best template to succeed.
I love that. I want us to transition into legacy now. There's so much that you have given. I know there's a lot of great wisdom that you've shared, but if you could think of like 1 to 2 things that you want those who you've mentored, you've taught along the way, because as you've gone through all these industries and a lot of the companies you worked with, you've picked up mentees along the way. I know just from the company that I worked at, there's a few people you still check in with. What would you say are things that you want to make sure, if only they could take away 2 things that you ever taught them? What are those 2 things that you'd want them to remember about you, or the lessons that they've learned from you?
I'll tell you what they've said to me. I look at you as a potential mentee, but she was actually fast tracking without me, so it would have been fine without Ed. Please understand that. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm very proud of that. Excuse me. 2 other mentees come to mind. One up in New England, who was like a right-hand man to me for years, and then went out on his own and just took off way beyond where I was. And he told me that I was his mentor, and he still refers to me to other people. Now, many years later, after he's soared way past me, and I remind him that, hey, I did what I could. I did my part. You were headed up there with or without me. And like I said about you, certain people you just know. But he said to me, you showed me your humanity. You showed me that it wasn't just about the money, although we recognize the importance of the money. And he showed me that you cared about me. I even had to tell him one day, hopefully he never hears this, but we were eating in a public setting and with clients. Let's pretend this is a spoon or a fork. And he had a wind up. He was kind of winding up to get to his mouth. And I noticed that and I thought, it's kind of distracting. And so I told him about it later. And it was awkward for me to talk to him about a personal habit. And I've had to do that also with managers with other issues we won't even think about. But I said, John, let's call him John because that's his name. You're doing a wind up when you're eating, and I know you love to eat because you're like me. You're Italian. I get it. And that was hard for me to do, but he took it under his advisement. And that was one of the things I did for him on a personal level as well. The other person is in Atlanta, and she is has her own company also. And I've already seen her zipping by me. She does so many things better than I do. Like she markets herself in all different social media and every other way, and does podcasts like you. And I'm old school. I don't have a website. Sorry. I only rely on word of mouth, which has worked for me for 28 years. I don't advocate it, but if you can get away with it, do it. Because you just have to listen to yourself. But no, I don't have the need for that. But she is so good at doing everything else that I never did, and she tells me all the time, even when she introduces me on her podcast. I'd like to introduce Ed. He has been a mentor to me, and that's nice. It's nice to know that someone actually noticed. I know you do. You've told me many times the same thing. I know you, this other gentleman, and this lady in Atlanta have said things like, "You didn't have to spend that much time with me, but you did. You didn't have to ask me what was important to me or what I didn't understand, but you did. You always told me I'm there for you if you need me, and I have been. So I think those are the main things: the relationship part, the caring part, and the being there for me when I need you. And she comes to me frequently on all sorts of things, and I just sit back and say, "Hit me. I'm ready, whatever it is." And it could be anything. And then she thanks me at the end. And then she also gets back to me and tells me, okay, we just talked about that one thing. I just want to let you know what happened with that as well. And you do the same thing with my goodness, many facets of your post hotel career. You kept me in the loop. You've said, here's what we're doing. What do you think? I appreciate that. Not everyone does that, but that's important.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I hope that the people listening will take from that the opportunity to do the same for others, because it matters more than you know. To have someone who is there to just even be a listening ear to provide guidance. Because I mean, usually in the times where I have made transitions and I've called you, sometimes I'm sure you can tell there's like confusion in my voice because you're trying to decide what do you do, and these decisions aren't small, because it affects your future. And so to get to be a part of those decisions with people, one, it's a big deal because someone trusts you, but two, it's you have the ability to make such a profound impact on not just someone's life but their future and their family. And so I feel like there's such a need. There's a lot of, for the last few years, so many jokes that people make about millennials and the generation coming up after them. And even though we seem ridiculous sometimes, like we're in such a massive desire for mentors, even if we don't realize it, but we just want guidance. We want someone to take us under our wing. And I mean, we're different. The people coming up, my generation, we're difficult. I'm not even going to deny that, but we are so in need of just someone who can take us under their wing, and in a variety of ways. I've told people, if you have a great marriage, please share your marriage with young married couples, because some people have never seen strong examples of marriage. If you are a business owner and you see people that want to be entrepreneurs, take them under your wing. If they're people that are open to guidance and words of wisdom, share it with them. Don't be greedy in your knowledge, because there's so many people out there who could use something that you've had. I've told you the story of and this is going to get into the more emotional one, but I told you the story of a pastor of ours who had cancer for a while, and there was someone from his church, from our church, that would go and visit him during treatments and would go and have breakfast with him, stuff like that. And this person from our church once told him, don't waste your cancer. So whatever it is that like you've gone through, whatever struggle it is, like don't waste that struggle and look back on it with regret. But now that you've come out of it, what can you share from that with other people? Because you're not the only one who's gone through whatever struggle that you have. Other people have as well. And there's so much wealth in those lessons that you've learned. So that's the piggyback I want to do with that one.
It's wonderful. And I'm looking at myself on camera and I'm looking pretty depleted, like a cancer patient should. I get that. But inside, I can still give back. And I agree with you. So you mentioned a couple of things that not enough mentoring going on. And I 100% agree with you. I think that's partly what's wrong with our country. I know there's a lot of right things. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But the dichotomy, the disruptiveness, the me versus you rather than how can we work together is because there are not enough mentors. And this is why I encourage people to look back. I know when I was in my 20s, I didn't really look back. I just didn't. I was young and trying to find out what was next. But I will encourage everyone, from young people to older people, look back in history so you can know where you're headed. And we don't do enough of that. And a lot of the leaders that have this information, especially older people, they're sitting around not doing much. They got a great amount of wealth. Find them, bring them into your organization. They have experience. And speaking of your generation, you are a millennial, correct?
Correct.
I was asked to go to Houston 2018 to a mega hotel, Intercontinental Hotel, and speak to about, I don't know, 75 people on millennials. And so I put together a PowerPoint, and they were all disappointed, I think, at the end when I said, millennials are people too. They have feelings, and I think they want essentially the same things that we all want in all of our generations. We certainly want respect. We want opportunity to go somewhere and to move up in the world. Okay, those are just two of the many things I said, but they were looking for some secret from me about how I get along with millennials, because I always do. I know millennials love music, so I play Bruno Mars. I like all generations of music, but as Bruno Mars once told me, I'm a dangerous man with some money in my pocket. Keep up. I keep up. Okay, so I shouldn't know that at my age, but I do. So they like magic. Everyone loves magic. You know, millennials aren't any different. They have to eat. They have to do the same things we all do. So treat them like people, but ask them what's important to them first if you want them to work for you.
I love that. I love that. That's so true. And that's good with any generation, understanding what they want first. But it goes back to the seek first to understand, not to be understood.
It does. And not all millennials are the same.
Absolutely.
For example, my wife is, pardon the expression, 20 years younger than me. I won't repeat that again. And so she's a Gen X, I guess. Yeah, I think so. Technically, and I have charts that show the differences in millennials, and I showed them that chart of all five of the different. I'm a boomer, and yet my wife, in many ways, is more like a boomer than a Gen X, which made me a little bit easier because she was in that transition period between that and boomer. So she has enough commonality that I think that has helped us as well. But even if you're from the same generation and you expect to have the same, you don't know that unless you follow Ashley's advice again. What's important to you? And you can ask that question all the time, phrase it different ways so it doesn't sound like it becomes a trigger point. You know, make that a part of your daily marriage, I think. We've been married 27 years, something like that. The
I love
first
that.
one lasted 27 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're up.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So we're gonna segue into the segment I like to call the 4 Ws. So I'm a big believer in you are what you read, what you listen to, what you watch, and who you hang out with. It says a lot about who you are. So again, this, if you haven't realized by now, this episode is very different than the ones I've done before. We're on hour 2 now, and I really wanted this to be about Ed, your legacy and all that you've done, because there's so much there. So usually I'd ask what the first one, what are you watching? But is there anything, I guess you can say what you and Kim are watching now, if you guys watch anything, if it's podcasts, stuff on TV. And then maybe if there's anything that you have watched, you're like, man, if anyone can get on this because it's, had an impact or whatever, share that.
Wow. Okay. What do I watch? What do we watch? Kim goes along for the ride because she knows I'm interested in the history in the past, and I am a trainer. So I love Jeopardy. I can't tell you how many times I'm yelling out the answers and she's doing one of these, like, here he goes again. But I love Jeopardy a lot and sports a lot. She's learned to love sports, so she's taken on a persona I never would have guessed when I first met her in a hotel. She was working in a hotel at the time that I met her through her boss, who was my friend. And so sports has been part of my whole life. I mentioned it a lot of times, but I like everything: football, baseball, basketball. And so I have my favorite teams and I watch them more than other teams. Like that a lot. Documentaries, very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, the historical, maybe I can learn something today that I didn't know. And I'm constantly learning new stuff every day. And also food, because I'm Italian and love food. I like food shows. I love that one show. I forget the name of it, when they kind of picked the topic of whether it was ice cream today or candy tomorrow, whatever it was, and they brought it up to the current day, and I wish I could remember the name of that. But anything food related, how to cook things. We watch the cooking channel a lot. That's a good thing. So yeah, I do watch other things that are popular, like Yellowstone. We were addicted to Yellowstone. I don't know. Maybe it's the scenic Western front that we rarely see in big cities. But there are lessons in that too. So do watch some current things, but we do not watch the news. Now, I'm not advocating that for anybody else. This is just Mr. Ed, as Ashley would call me Mr. Ed sometimes, because my last name, I am an umbrella too long. So where was I headed with that? I knew I was
You're
headed
at
down.
news. Don't watch. So we don't watch news.
The news. I even blocked it out of my mind mentally because I know you don't want to hear this.
I love that you don't advocate for not. Excuse me. I love that you don't advocate for not watching the news. I openly would. I encourage people, don't watch the news because it's just going to stress you out. It's not meant to bring a bunch of joy. It just brings fear. And if you're, especially going back to your whole time in the wilderness, if you're in a time of confusion, don't watch the news for sure, because it's only going to stress you out.
Ashley, I first heard that from someone who must have been watching you all these years, from Tony Robbins years ago. He said, "You want to start the day off right? Don't watch the news." He said the same thing, and that's been with me for a long time. But yeah, I can get news in other ways, but I don't. So that's one thing I could say that I'm proud of, but I wish I wasn't really proud of it at all. I used to be insanely tied into 24. 24 was a show that my buddy Jack Bauer, I got so into it that I have a Jack Bauer, I have a t-shirt that says 24 on it. And, I mean, it's crazy. And if they had a Jack Bauer fan club, I would have joined it. But and I didn't appreciate the violence and all that, but I was so spellbound by how determined he was, how he loved the United States, things that are near and dear to me. Not necessarily approve of all of his messages, did not approve how he handled relationships. That wasn't a good thing I took from it. But man, at the end of the day, I can say he loves America. I love it too. He must be good. Yeah, there's things wrong. We understand that. But at the end of the day, it's where I want to be. So I don't know how helpful that was, but it's kind of a broad-based approach to many different things.
Love that. So what do you listen to? Are you big on, I mean, do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen to, I know you said you listen to a lot of music. Do you listen to audiobooks? What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say um, more so music. And I use music as an escape mechanism when I need to. And so being older, I grew up with Motown, an ancient language no longer spoken. But then I went to college and evolved into heavy metal and rock and all that stuff. And I played the guitar too. So I was always interested in people who played the guitar. But musically, I like everything, except not a huge fan of country. And I wasn't supposed to say that. My wife said, don't mention that. I said, I have to be honest. I try. I love certain people in country. I do. I happen to really like Darth, but Darth Brooks, but I don't like most of it. But I do love Billy Joel. First time I met my wife was on a date to a Billy Joel concert in Philadelphia. So I even had prepared a dinner, like a pre-show dinner. I had this outside chairs and tables, and it rained. It was in my car. I couldn't do it, so I went in the car, got out the food, and never got to do that. But we had a good time, and so the next date was a Billy Joel concert, and it was further away from home, and same type thing. And then we dated in between, and then the third time was Billy Joel. Also, that was up in upstate New York and at the Syracuse Dome, whatever that's called. So I do like Billy Joel a lot, but even beyond just individuals, and I love Bruno Mars a whole lot too, and that's why I think he's the entertainer. I think he's the most complete entertainer of this generation. Back in the day, I had Michael Jackson in the 70s, maybe the 80s, and I thought he was the man. Everyone loved him, not everybody, but a lot of people did. And then prior to me being born, it was Sinatra. He was big, but in the 2000s, I don't know how long Bruno's been around, 2010s, I found him to be the most versatile performer, and I really like him a lot.
Interesting.
So yeah, I even like some classical, not a lot, but some classical, and all different genres as well. So nothing particular, but everything in general.
Got it. When it comes to what are you reading, can you share maybe something you're reading right now, and then maybe like 3 books that have had a big impact on you?
Okay, the impact books, I mentioned a couple of them. The Daniel Pink had a huge, profound effect on my business as well. The book on 5,001 Ways to Reward Employees helped me to understand not just running a hotel, but imparting to other people who I consulted for the need for them to get off the schneid, as they say, and look at other ways to motivate people, because that will in turn come back 1,000 times on the P&L statements. It will. Once you establish a culture, people have said to me over the years, Residence Inn was the best job I ever had, because we all appreciated their culture many years later and taken it into other areas. So those 2 books had influence um, how to influence people. Um, God, I can't remember the name.
How to win friends
Such
and
a,
influence people.
what was it?
That how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah. I mean, that's been around forever, but that was so long ago that I read it. But again, influencing people in my mind goes back to building rapport. So, so that was another one. Um, I read another book that I love called NLP. Um, it's there's a lady named Jo Ellen Demetrius, and she wrote this book all about neurolinguistic programming, and it has taught me so much about verbal, visual, and vocal communication. I did not know much about the vocal communication. I knew enough about in-person kind of importance of that. That's like 55% of what we learn from other people come from visually. But the other giant chunk that I didn't know about was verbal. So I learned a lot from that as well. And her book has been rewritten several times. And for some reason, I can't think of it at the moment.
So wait, so it's not called NLP? You had said NLP.
No, it's not. But if you type in Jo Ellen Demetrius, however you spell that, and or NLP, it will come up.
Got it. Okay, I'll look at that up so we can put it in
Yeah,
a link
do that
below.
because I refer to it all the time as the NLP book, and I have read 3 other books that I didn't quite understand, but she put it into her own way of the way she even picks her juries by using the 3 aspects of what we call verbal, vocal, and visual communication, or the 3 V's of NLP. So that's one. The one I'm reading now is called Finished Business. It's about sports, and it's about Philadelphia, where I grew up and still support the sports teams. And ironically, I don't have my business finished just yet. I want to keep doing that. But the title of this book talks about things in the past. There he goes with his history again, and things that I could remember but forgot. Things that I never knew, that I never ever would have known. But it's fascinating reading to me. Quite the sports fanatic.
What's it called again?
Finished Business.
Finished Business. Interesting. Okay, we'll put that one in the link below as well. And then, Ed, when it comes to the people you choose to hang out with, not the people you have to hang out with, when it comes to the people you choose to hang out with and spend time with, what would you say are common characteristics with those people?
I think they fall into different categories. For my homies, my people from my high school and small town America, 5,000 people in a small town outside of Philly. And what I think about them is that the trust is there. I got your back no matter what. We grew up together. What an ideal town it was. We didn't know it at the time, but we realize it now. I still stay in touch with so many people from that time frame, probably 15 people or so on a regular basis. And for that very reason. And then I have my friends from college, and it's a different mindset, but it's the same mindset. We spent 4 years together, and probably most of my closest friends also played on the basketball team with me at that same college. But I have many dear friends who didn't play on that team, and they know who they are. And we spend time texting. We spend time chatting. I'm on the phone constantly, excuse me, with all of them and with my high school friends, especially during sports events. We're texting back and forth about what we could have done better on that last play. The coaches are bummed. He doesn't listen to me. Why not?
Yeah.
So I go through that, and also my hotelier friends. I mean, you worked for one of my good friends, Rahul, and I consider him a friend for life. We share when we talk. We don't talk much about hotels. We talk about other things in his life and my life, and so uh, that's there. I may have a special shout out to a group of friends that were my backup rock and roll group, the introverts. I refer to them as the verts, and we've all gotten more than our public relations value out of that one one of those concerts. So verts out there, if you ever do see this, still love you.
I love that. Now, I know we're coming to the end now. So before we go, there's so much wisdom and encouragement you have shared. But is there any other last words of wisdom that you want to share with entrepreneurs and leaders listening today?
Well, I shared some of it earlier, but I'll reiterate it. We are in a war in business. Let's not forget that. We can engage in war professionally, and I encourage you to do that. You'll get more out of it than not. Um, I also mentioned to you a couple of times, actually, decisiveness, important of that. Take a shot while you're young enough. Try something new. If you really have an itch, give it a try. If it doesn't work, you have time to recover. Okay, don't be afraid, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. One of my big heroes is Michael Jordan, and that's not a reference to sports anymore. It's just him. So he failed miserably. He didn't make his 10th grade basketball team. How would you like to be that coach? You got to ask that question the rest of your life. He went on to North Carolina, and he missed so many shots that he wished he had made for that team, but he failed in many ways miserably there, in his estimation, not mine. And then he went to the Chicago Bulls, and he was expected to be this savior. And he's the first to say, I was asked to take the last shot of the game many times, and I didn't make that shot. And many other times I failed miserably. But it was by his failing that he learned the true lessons of life. And because he failed so much and admitted it, and became, in my opinion, the greatest of all time in that sport, I look up to him for admitting that. So understanding your reputation is clearly important. You've heard me refer to it, but in whatever your business line might be, you can go to another job, but you take your reputation with you wherever you go, and make sure that fills in the check boxes of the things we talked about in terms of intrinsic, mostly intrinsic. Let's see. I like to also say, prepare for the worst, expect the best. A lot of people don't like to prepare for the worst. They just want to expect the best, and they run out. And there's nothing to catch them there. Which reminds me of another quick story, if I can. I'm in the town of Pisa. Pisa is the leaning tower of Pisa. We've all heard about it. We see it on Little Caesars commercials. I went up the tower of Pisa back in the 70s when they didn't have a railing. So I went up, and you're kind of leaning in one direction as you're walking up these steps. It's bizarre. And I finally got to the top, and I was so excited. I ran out, and it was a rainy day. And I ran out, and I said, oh my God. I was almost at the end of the Leaning Tower of Pisa's platform. No guardrail, no nothing. My Italian people are great with food and wine, but they're crazy. And so that has since been eradicated. I've since looked on, and it's no longer there. But I thought to myself, my God, I didn't prepare for the worst. I just prepared for the best. Sorry, I divert occasionally. My mind works on flight of ideas. Therefore, my wife is a saint more than anyone else can imagine. So prepare for the worst, because if you don't use it, you might use it later. but many times you might use some of it. And if you go there, at least you sound intelligent and you sound like you've thought about it as well. And then probably the last thing I would say is what Jack DeBoer said. And Jack DeBoer was my first hero in business, the man I mentioned at Residence Inn. He said, risk only money.
Mm.
And that was the title of his book. And I did that, get that one right. So Risk Only Money is a book where he says, and I'm just paraphrasing one sentence, you can always make more money, but don't risk yourself. Don't risk your relationship with people, because that is who you are. And that's the most important thing I took from that book and from working from him. My hero, one of my heroes.
I love that. I love that. Ed, where can people find you? I know you said you don't have a website.
Oh yeah, I don't have a website. I think if you go on LinkedIn, I do know that. I do know that much. I know LinkedIn, and you can type in my last name should be somewhere. Ashley, when you're uploading this.
Yes,
So,
and I'll include a link to your LinkedIn as well below.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So they can just click it. Anywhere else you'd recommend they reach out?
Get the phone number off of LinkedIn. I have my home phone number there and my cell number. I'm really approachable, and I know most of you will not call. It's just the way it works, and that's okay. But feel free to call if you want, and I can share more information. And if I don't have the answer, I know enough to say, I don't have the answer, but maybe read this book or maybe talk to someone else that I know. I will be honest with you. And to me, it's the only way to go. I've learned my hard lessons about not being honest in the past. So I'm just giving you the shortcut. If you prefer to be dishonest, go for it. But that's probably, I think that's probably it. I mean, I mentioned intrinsic as well, so I'm not going to repeat that again. There's something else. I thought of two more things. When I was teaching and when you're teaching, use the Pygmalion principle. I didn't even know it had a name. I was doing it and didn't know. And the Pygmalion principle is treat people the way you think they can elevate themselves to. Have a higher expectation of them than they have of themselves, and you'll find that they will ascribe to that. They will try to meet that principle. Not in all cases. Nothing works all the time. Let's face it. But I have found that when I do that, and I'll tell you a secret that should not be shared anywhere, but in every class I ever had, including classes that my friend here has been through, and I know you've been through several of them when you were with the hotel group, right? Ashley was one of the better students, but I always told those classes that they, at the end of the session, that they were the A team. I challenged them on the front end by being this Pygmalion effect. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And then halfway through, I'd say, well, you're doing pretty good, but you're not the A team just yet. And at the end of every class, I'd say, you know what? You're the A team. I can look on my shelf up there. You can't see it. I have a big board of things that people have sent me, a basketball with everyone's signature on it saying, from your A team. I've got ducks from Homewood Suites that are signed by the A team. Everyone thinks they're the A team, but that's called the Pygmalion effect. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, and I know this is the last, is the platinum rule. The golden rule for some of you is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But the platinum rule is a level higher than that. It's do unto others as they would have done unto themselves. Repeat that in, I will. Do unto others as they would have done unto themselves. So it's not what you think they need. It's what they think they need. But Ed, how am I to find out? Ask them. Ask them. Okay, especially in business. What's important to you? Now you'll know. Okay, so platinum rule supersedes the golden rule, which isn't bad, but this is a little better.
Got it. I love that. I love that. Thank you for all of your wisdom and encouragement, Mr. Ed. I do want to say, so you open it up for anyone to call. I know that you're serious about that. If anyone does call him, I just want to encourage those people to also give Miss Kim a shout out. Tell her thank you. If she's not getting it from her business, if you could just tell him to relay that, that would be really, really sweet. Ed, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I so appreciate you taking this time and allowing me to provide a platform where you could share your life story. A lot of these are anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, but I knew I wanted it to be longer for you, but more in depth. And so I appreciate you trusting me with that. So thank you, and thank you for being a part of this. It's really an honor. So I appreciate that.
And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share some of my good and bad stories along the way. I'm losing my voice now, but this has been good for me, and therefore, it's a win-win situation. That's what life should be, a win-win.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Well, this will drop this Friday. I look forward to seeing you in person soon. Hopefully, we can go out to Florida. We can go as a you'll get to meet my family because you haven't met my family yet. So love to take them so you can meet them and I get to meet Miss Kim finally.
Yeah, send pictures too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Bye now.